So good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome back to day two of the conference. So I hope everybody had a lovely evening, both those of you here in Tunis and also everybody watching back at home. So we're going to be getting started very shortly with our first session. Just before we do, a couple of things to mention. First of all, just to remind everybody that recordings and slides from all of the presentations and the sessions from yesterday are now available online. Everybody here in the room, you can access those using the QR codes, which you'll find on the desks in front of you. And for those of you watching online, you can access those using the link that is in the reception area of the online platform. And secondly, just to mention again the interaction and the chat and things like that. So we had lots of questions yesterday, lots of comments, which was great, and hopefully more again today. So for everybody in the room, please feel free to raise your hand during the sessions and ask questions in the normal way. And for anyone watching online, post your questions in the chat on the right-hand side of your screen, and those will be passed across to the session moderators during each of the sessions that's taking place today. So we've got 3 sessions this morning. We're going to be starting off now with our first session, which is going to be looking at delivering a flexible spectrum policy framework to encourage innovation. So to explain more and to introduce our speakers from the session and the topics more broadly, I'd like to now introduce and welcome to the podium Richard Womersley from LS Telcom, who's going to be moderating this session. Richard, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour. Sabah al-khair. Hope you're all well. So you may remember last evening we finished with a question from Philip Marnick, which was, aren't we looking at this the wrong way? Should we not be looking at having a flexible framework and then working within that? So I was thinking about this overnight, and I came to the thought, it reminded me of something that was in a speech by an air traffic controller. And what the air traffic controller said was this: the reason for having air traffic controllers is a little bit hazy, really. The chance of 2 aeroplanes being in the same place at the same time, at the same height, is so mathematically remote as to not being worth considering. All you do with air traffic control is force them down very narrow corridors, thereby increasing the risk of collision and thereby justifying the job of air traffic controllers to keep them apart. And I was thinking about this and I thought, well, this to me rings a bell, because this is what we do currently with spectrum management. We've all seen pictures like this. Scans of frequency spectrum over a period of time. This one was originally done by Ofcom. And what we see is there are frequencies in use and gaps between them. And if you look at what the frequencies in use are, they're grouped together. We have broadcasting grouped together. We have PMR grouped together. We push things together and then spend our time managing them to push them apart, to keep them from each other, which is exactly what the air traffic controllers do. So my question this morning is, should we be looking at things differently? Should we have a very, very flexible regime for spectrum management? And then what would that open up? What kind of innovations would that provide? And we've 3 speakers who are going to tackle this question. The first speaker is Mohammed Al-Janoubi, who is the General Manager of Radio Spectrum Planning at CITC. So Mohammed, let me hand over to you and you can start answering this question for us.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Richard. Very happy and very glad to be here and to talk again with our colleagues and friends in Global Forum. With regard to the title of our panel today, which is Flexible Spectrum Management, as you saw, Richard started from Philippe's question yesterday about the flexibility in spectrum management. We in CITC believe that, in order to enable different spectrum applications and to enable innovation in spectrum, we all need to be flexible. And I will be speaking in my slide about one of the approaches that we believe, one of the flexible spectrum management tools that we adopted in CITC and we are working to build in the coming years, which is the lightly licensed spectrum. I will talk about the journey of adopting lightly licensed spectrum, which we started last year, and I will be talking about what we have done so far and what we will do comingly. In the beginning, when we talk about spectrum management, we in Saudi Arabia believe that spectrum is a key enabler toward Vision 2030. As you know, spectrum going all the way across different sector, not only ICT. We talk about ICT, space, military, security, etc. And we all know that talking, about the real wireless application is not something easy these days, since the demand is increasing across all of these sectors. So what we have done in Saudi Arabia to meet the national spectrum demand at 2019, we worked alignedly and closely with the national and international stakeholders through different workshops, public consultations at that year, and we have published our national spectrum management, which focus what we will do in the coming 5 years in matters related to spectrum across all of these sector. One of the very important goal and initiative of that national spectrum strategy was enabling innovative and commercial use of spectrum. We started working on this important initiative, and last year we have published our commercial and innovative use of spectrum outlook, which consider identifying big chunk of spectrum for a new regime that we will adopt in Saudi Arabia. We called this regime as lightly licensed spectrum. We identified 13 gigahertz, which is not a small chunk of spectrum. This lightly licensed approach are based on sharing mechanism and are based as well on enabling data and spectrum management. So what we are targeting at the first phase of this lightly licensed spectrum, we are targeting the 4 gigahertz band for industrial 5G use. We will study this. We will have public consultation with the industry in the coming time, and we are targeting as well the 6 gigahertz band, which have been identified. We have heard all the discussion yesterday and recently about the 6 gigahertz band, the upper part, the lower part. Should we go to IMT? Should we go to WLAN? As you all know, that Saudi Arabia was the first country in the region that identified the full 6 gigahertz band for WLAN application, and by adopting the lightly licensed spectrum, we are considering enabling the 6 gigahertz band for standard power or high power Wi-Fi, which will be controlled operation based on database approach to make sure the harmonization between the newly to make sure the coexistence and sharing between the newly adopted Wi-Fi and WLAN application and between the legacy applications in the band, which is the fixed surfaces and the satellite for sure application as well. And the third band is the 28 gigahertz band, where all we know that this is a key satellite band, and we will consider controlled as well operation through the lightly licensed regime. So what is next in the lightly licensed regime? We will have a public consultation coming at the end of this quarter, and we expect the regime to be adopted and published at the end of this year. Well, with regard to flexibility, talking about flexible spectrum management, we in CITC believe that the unlicensed exempt can enable the innovation of managing spectrum. So one of the main reasoning behind the decision of CITC of opening up the whole 6 gigahertz band is not only to enable Wi-Fi for sure. Talking about Wi-Fi, I will not be talking about the debate between should we go Wi-Fi or shouldn't. We had the discussion yesterday from different industry and regulator, but one of the main reasoning push us toward this decision is not only Wi-Fi. The unlicensed exempt will open the band for different kind of application which might enable innovation in applying this to different industry, to different sector, not only Wi-Fi industry. So again, more spectrum for license exempt for sure will enable innovation. This is one of our beliefs in CITC. One of the other also believe that we need to work all as a regulator in the future is to enable data-driven spectrum management, as it's very important key toward flexible spectrum management. So based on that, we are working right now in CITC on an initiative to enable different kind of techniques. One of those very important techniques is the automatic frequency coordination, which named AFC, that will enable standard power Wi-Fi application in the 6 gigahertz band by controlled through the database approach. This is a very newly techniques in spectrum management. What we are heading is we are aligning with partners in the industry, Federated Wireless and Aruba HPE, toward having a demonstration, hopefully before the end of this year for this AFC, to see the capabilities and to adopt such technique in the future. We believe that data is the key toward moving and toward enabling sharing in the near future. So we are reaching to the end of my slide. The main takeaways is we believe that talking about flexible spectrum management is not something unnecessary, given the spectrum crunch we are facing, given the demand coming from satellite, mobile, also military, security applications. Talking about not only, we always, go to the WRC discussion. The discussion is not considering one frequency band. We used to talk about demand from UHF till very high spectrum band. So spectrum managers need to be more flexible, adopting different kind of flexibility or different approach of flexibility in spectrum management. And to do that, we believe we as a spectrum management need to work in three aspects. First one is to follow the technology, to follow the application in different sector very closely. Secondly is to enable the spectrum sharing and spectrum coexistence. And thirdly, to for sure enable the tool of data that we have in spectrum management. And on an international level, we believe that the coming WRC and the international spectrum management regime in the coming future need to consider that to fulfill the requirement and to reach to the harmonization. We see some of the sharing or some of coexistence database approaches coming here and there from different countries, but we need a common ground internationally to complete the harmonization. We know how big and how important is having the harmonization and utilizing spectrum. With this, I conclude my slide. Thank you very much, Richard and husband.
Thank you, Mohammed. And I have a question coming in my head already, which is, what do we mean by flexibility? Are we talking about the flexibility to use technology within the spectrum, or the flexibility to use the spectrum? So maybe you could have a think on that one while I introduce Claire Lyons, who's the head of European Spectrum Policy for Ofcom. Good morning to you, Claire. You can
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Absolutely fine. Yes, please go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Salam alaikum. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm just sorry that I'm not in sunny Tunis with you, not just because you're probably having far better weather than we are in London, but I know that we gain an awful lot from meeting in person. So, as I say, I'm sorry not to be there. I've been asked to share with you a little about Ofcom's journey over the last few years and explain how we believe we're taking the right steps to enable spectrum innovation in our spectrum management decision. We've got a very long history of making innovative decisions ourselves, but I'm going to focus on the last sort of 5 years or so. Next slide, please. So from about 2013, we started to think about the future and what it might look like and what that might mean for spectrum use and spectrum demand, not just in the long and medium term, but also in the short term. And we worked very closely with other arms of Ofcom, such as our technology and strategy arms, to come up with the kind of papers and solutions that we have done. I would start by saying that I think we've also started to think of ourselves in a slightly different way. So we're not just a spectrum manager in an old way. We see ourselves as custodians of a shared resource, and that our main role is about enabling as much sensible use by as many different users and technologies as is practically possible. So I've included on this slide just some of the publications that we've put out since about 2015. I could spend hours going through all of them, but I'm just going to touch on a couple of them briefly. And one preface that I would add, I don't necessarily think that our leaps forward in policy terms are always about the very big ticket publications like our spectrum framework or our consultation on the millimetre wave band, which we've just put out. Sometimes it's the very small things which make the really big difference. So we've kept up a very innovative short-range device regime, and we continue to revise that on a constant basis to reflect the kind of uses that consumers and businesses can avail themselves of when it comes to wireless. But I'm going to start with sharing. It's a good place to start, and surprised, well, not surprised actually, how much of my comments will echo what Mohammed has just said about sharing, although we might go about it in slightly different ways. So from 2015, we were absolutely convinced that the demand was going to carry on growing and continue to do so, and that spectrum sharing was going to be a very important feature of meeting that demand. In fact, probably the most important feature of making that demand. So we looked at how we could come up with new opportunities and new tools to enable spectrum sharing to meet this growing demand. Our framework provided us with a new way of thinking about spectrum sharing, and it offered us a model for how we would systematically consider whether the frequencies that were coming along, either requested or newly available, and whether they would have the potential to be shared. And as I say, our aim was to make sure that as much spectrum was available to as many users as possible in the least restrictive way. So a few things I'll highlight from our spectrum sharing framework. One was about, we looked at identified the barriers to sharing. We then tried to think about the set of regulatory tools and technological enablers that would have the facility to make sharing more feasible in different scenarios. And we also set out how we would consider sharing on a case-by-case basis, taking into account the incumbent's use, if there was an incumbent use, their characteristics, and then what might the characteristics be of any new use. It wasn't a smooth path, I would say. I think we were aware, even from the beginning, that there are some stakeholders who didn't hold spectrum sharing in the positive light that we did, and they saw it as a possible threat to their own use. But we believed it was definitely possible to respect the rights of existing users whilst increasing spectrum sharing. Most licenses we have in the UK don't actually confer exclusivity, and that's very, very fortunate for us when we were embarking upon a different approach to authorization. But it also was useful because we weren't trying to take a rigid approach about that there would be sharing in every single band. This is about looking on a case-by-case basis. So when we looked at the sorts of barriers that were around to us, we thought about how we could use tools to get over that. Now, the consultation document and the statement are quite lengthy, so I'm just going to focus on two very small aspects. If I could just move to the next slide, please. So there's a couple of things I would like to highlight. The first aspect that we found as a barrier was about the availability of spectrum use and spectrum demand. So without the accurate information on what is actually the functional use and the operational use, it's not really always possible to identify where there were good opportunities for sharing or to deduce where there are barriers might be in preventing sharing. So the answer to that for us was about increased information, and that was about ourselves gaining more information, which would tell us whether there's actual use. So rather than just looking at the number of authorizations, what was the actual use? And look at that in both real time and forward looking. So that included us looking at the market data to see where are different sectors going in terms of their demand. And then the second aspect I'd like to highlight is about the technological challenges. And these were the aspects which actually limit the ability to manage coexistence between sharers, either within band or in adjacent bands. And we wanted to look at the ways that technology can enable more efficient and effective and intelligent sharing. So we looked at things like enhancements to geolocation databases. Has that got potential to manage access between opportunistic sharers, for instance? And we also looked at more frequency agile equipment. One of the things that we took into account was whether we could use our authorization conditions to produce incentives as well. And we looked at that in some context in our TV Whitespace program, which was attempted nearly a decade ago now. And we looked about the considerations that would mean for licenses. So very quick canter through our sharing framework, appreciate that. But overall, I'd say it's been pretty successful. We've augmented the number of bands that could be used. So 38 to 42 has been mentioned a couple of times so far in this conference. We've actually had users in there since about 2019. And altogether across our framework, we've now got about 1,500 licensees. And that's mainly in low power and medium power uses. And that's across 1,800, 2.3 gigahertz, 38 to 42, and the lower part of 26 gigahertz, although 26 gigahertz is going to be overtaken by our millimeter wave consultation. But I haven't got the time, unfortunately, to go into all of that now. The next steps I would think that it's worth highlighting are about our spectrum strategy, which we formulated between sort of 2018 and we published in 2021. And the interesting things I'd like to point out about this one were the areas of focus that we think would help us to achieve our vision, which was about increasing spectrum use to enable growth and innovation. So the first aspect was about supporting innovation wirelessly. I've mentioned that we wanted to increase the use of data that we had access to, and that's our own research data, market data, and our own technological data, so that we could make more spectrum available for innovation before even the long-term use is certain. And we've taken quite active steps to make that happen. I'm being given a timing warning. So the other one was about including international standards and technological equipment, and how can we make sure that the equipment is fit for purpose in different scenarios? Because one of the things we found was that sharing was limited by poor receiver performance in different bands and different frequencies. If we go to the next slide very quickly, we looked at how networks are looking to increase demand. And these are some of the solutions that we've come up with or that we've identified. Then if we go on to the very next slide, we're looking at how demand's shifting. And most importantly, we're looking at more sophisticated coexistence analysis and how wireless systems can be more resilient to interference from their neighbours. And that's where we see a very particular role in the standards bodies, where we improve the performance of equipment. On the next slide, I've got a very quick canter through our mobile spectrum demand and the sorts of things that we're looking at. And I think actually they mirror quite a lot of what Mohammed just said, so I can relate to the same messages. And then if we go to the very next slide, I'd look at some of the planned projects that we've got underway over the course of the next 5 to 10 years that we think will increase our wireless innovation cooperation and how we can get more wireless innovation in the market. And then I'm conscious I've got no slides in the deck. So the last thing I was going to recommend was a couple of things about how do we make innovation really work. And I think the few factors I would highlight were the willingness to make spectrum available, at least on a trial basis, before market demand is known or even assessed. The second thing I would say is it's very useful to have a flexible and agile authorization framework. And I think in the UK, we're incredibly lucky with our Wireless Telegraphy Act, which enables us to do quite avant-garde steps in terms of authorization. In terms of anticipation, we know that as a regulator, spectrum manager, spectrum custodian, we don't know everything that's going to come about. So we work very hard to keep abreast of the technology and engage with our stakeholders on a constant basis to see what is coming along. And then the final thing I would note is about equipment again. We know that sharing is the future. We don't see any other solution to meeting the demand, but we think that equipment has to improve, and that's both for in-band sharing and legacy equipment that might be requiring guard bands. It's incredibly important that we all take responsibility to make this happen. We've got a responsibility, governments, regulators, standards bodies and stakeholders. We've got a responsibility to make the most of this shared asset. And I apologise, Richard, I've probably gone a bit over time and had to canter through things, but thank you.
So much to talk about, always the way with these things. So thank you very much, Claire. You will stick around for the Q&A session at the end, won't you?
Yes.
Great. Okay, fantastic. So we will move on to our third speaker in this session, who is Janine Karam, who's the Senior Manager of Government Affairs at Qualcomm. Good morning to you, Janine, and I'll just let you go straight ahead.
صباح الخير للجميع. I'm very happy to participate in this event and especially to take part of this session focusing on policy, regulation, and innovation. So in few minutes, I will try to briefly present the technology evolution, mainly in the mobile sector, and how innovation is driving spectrum demand. And of course, when we talk about spectrum, here the important role of regulators to ensure that spectrum is used in the best interest of everyone, but at the same time to see, based on best practices, how to tackle challenges effectively and enable innovation. So let's see the first slide, please. Today, we know the technology is evolving rapidly, and also the technology is transforming our world. During the last 30 years, the demand or the target was for connecting people to people, people to information with the different generations, 2G, 3G, 4G. But today, there is a shift, a big shift. So the target, the demand for the next 30 years is not to connect people to people or to people to things, but for people's world to be interconnected. So the whole environment will be interconnected in parallel. That's why from Qualcomm perspective, Qualcomm is working to enable a world where virtually everyone and everything is a part of this connected intelligent edge. And of course, 5G will be in the center of the intelligent connectivity. And we can see from the different 3GPP releases how 5G is rapidly evolving, expanding to new industries and scaling down to meet diverse IoT requirements. A few years ago, when we talked about 5G, the focus was on enabling, enhancing mobile broadband applications. So Release 15 established the foundation of the technology. But after, with Release 16, it builds on these foundations to expand to address new industries and deliver new capabilities. Release 16 focused on mainly the high-performance IoT needs, including mission-critical designs, new deployment models like private networks, new functionalities like precise positioning, unlicensed spectrum. And recently, in March 2022, 3GPP completed Release 17 with more industry expansion. In Release 17, we can see new innovation, new concept introduced is the new radio light, the RadCap, reduced capabilities, which scales down 5G new radio for reduced complexity and lower power consumption. And this is very important for devices like high-end wearables, industrial sensors, smart grids. And also we can see in Release 17 established 5G new radio support for satellite communications by the introduction of NTN and also the expansion for millimeter waves in addition to device enhancement. And now, after what's next? After 5G, we have 5G Advanced, and Release 18 will be the inaugural standard release for 5G Advanced that also will set off the second wave of wireless innovation. And I think in session 6 today, we'll have more discussion on the path beyond 5G to 6G. Next slide, please. So we can see today all the emerging technologies and innovation, they are driving spectrum demand. Spectrum is essential, is a key. And access to 5G spectrum in different bands, low, mid, and high band, is essential to have the benefits and to deliver innovative new services and applications. Yesterday, we listened to different sessions highlighting the importance of low band and mid band, but it's also important to highlight the importance of the high band, the millimeter waves band. If we want to describe or to talk about the layer cake model adopted by many operators. So the low band considered as coverage layer, the mid band considered as speed layer, and the millimeter wave is the capacity layer. So it will be very useful to deliver multiple gigabit data rates to end users, especially in specific location, in high density locations. For example, malls, airports, stadiums, convention center. So the millimeter waves will support more capacity for a better experience. And the 5G millimeter waves will complete the 5G puzzle. So next slide, please. This is an example. Next slide, please. So today, all the technology developments, the growing demand for spectrum, the innovative applications, all these together mean that the role of regulators is now more important than ever. But all these changes also mean that they need to consider updating the approach to tackle challenges effectively and also to take full advantage of new opportunities. That's why a new mindset is needed, a new approach in spectrum management is needed. So this approach should support first wireless innovation, and by adopting a clear spectrum strategy to ensure that harmonized spectrum is made available at the right time to enable investment, innovation. Another important point is to ensure efficient and effective use of spectrum. It is predicted by 2025, billion of devices will be connected, and all they need is spectrum. So today, as we see in the two presentations, some regulators, they are starting to adopt a new concept, to adopt, instead of use it or lose it approach to spectrum licensing, they are beginning to focus more on use it when needed. So by allowing spectrum to be shared, to be allocated maybe for shorter time periods with local licenses, as well as to use the unlicensed spectrum or light licensing regime, as mentioned by Mohammed. So these new licensing approach are needed to ensure that lack of access to radio spectrum will not prevent innovation. So as a summary, at the end, I will say that a forward-looking regulatory framework is essential to attract telecom investment, to encourage innovation. So transparency, collaboration between different stakeholders, to have a clear strategy, to have flexibility, are very important to enable innovation, especially in the MENA region. Thank you.
Janine. So I'm hearing two different things. First of all, that we need a more flexible approach to spectrum management to enable access to spectrum technologies. But also that to encourage innovation, we need to allow those technologies to be used by a wider range of people in an innovative way. So there's two kinds of innovation going on. One is in spectrum management, and the other is in the use of technologies. Janine, you talked about 5G. Mohammed, you talked about Wi-Fi and 5G. And Claire, you were kind of more open to different technologies. So my first question is this, and we are relatively short on time this morning. So my first question is this: where do we see, where's the key to innovation? Does the key come from opening up the spectrum for technology, or does it come to enabling that technology to be used in a more flexible way? Mohammed, if you want to go first.
Thank you so much, Richard. I think the simple answer is both. We as a spectrum regulator need to think about always opening the spectrum for for new technology as the situation of the technology itself, talking about 5G, Wi-Fi, and etc. However, also we need to think more about flexible management tools of spectrum management. My dear colleague Janine just mentioned that spectrum is crucial for 5G. So it is only crucial for 5G or for other application. I think given the huge demand from different sector, spectrum becoming crucial for different application and user. Now the second question is the exclusive wave allocation and assignment will meet the demand of the future. I believe simple answer from my position as a regulator is no. We as a regulatory bodies and also the international regulatory bodies, the industry standardization bodies need to consider more about sharing different scenarios, because talking about the application, when we go to the application, how the wireless application is operating, we can see that there are a big room of sharing, a big room of utilizing all of those spectrum. Not every application used at the same time as Janine just mentioned, or at the same location. So we need to change our mindset to meet the demand of the future.
I love the idea of the answer with both. Great. Claire, do you want to touch on this one?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
So I think I agree with Mohammed, and I was smiling when he said both, because that could be my answer as well. But I would make a comment about technology, and I think that from a UK perspective, we are technology agnostic, and the licenses that we issue tend to be technology and service neutral. So you might have a band mask edge for the license, but within that you can do pretty much whatever technology you want, so long as you're providing the service and you don't cause any interference. And I think that's important. There's a very, very important lesson to be learned from the intelligent transport system and experience in Europe. So the technology, there are three technologies using about 70 or 80 megahertz spectrum, none of which talk to one another. So spectrum that could easily have been made available for Wi-Fi, 20 megahertz of it is sterilized for ITS in the lower the lower 6 gigahertz, sorry. That doesn't seem very sensible. So technology really needs to interoperate, and that's where I think the message about standards becomes very important. We're in a world where we can't allow technologies to demand exclusive protection. That would be my main lever for driving innovation.
Janine, that leads perfectly to you as a company who not only work on standards, but also one who develop the technology that applies standards. So should we be looking for more flexibility in accessing spectrum, in using technology, or maybe, as Claire suggests, interoperability between technologies and standards?
I think in one sentence, I think the necessity from regulators really to adopt spectrum harmonization, to use harmonized spectrum, to use technical and service neutrality, and to try to minimize all unnecessary regulations and to eliminate barriers for access to spectrum and for the introduction of new services and new applications.
So stop forcing the aircraft down narrow corridors so that we have to manage them. Let's open the airspace to devices. Do we have any questions in the room? Would anybody like to raise anything with our panel? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands at the moment.
Richard, could I come back on your analogy about aircraft? I think
yes, of course.
There is a way in which the harmonization approach is another way of channeling the aircraft just down one route. So I'm not sure that harmonization is the panacea that everybody touts it to be. You don't need global harmonization for every single type of spectrum use or spectrum need. In fact, there's loads of equipment that can just be dealt with at a regional or even ultra local level. So I understand the argument from stakeholders that they want harmonization at a global level, because that makes their manufacturing easier and cheaper. And in some ways, it does make equipment get out to consumers, but it then becomes a barrier itself. If there was only one type of technology to be able to be used at a harmonized global frequency, you are cutting off the supply of spectrum in that band to any other type of new user. So doesn't that stifle innovation?
I think we're in agreement there, Claire. I think my point was we shouldn't necessarily force people into a particular approach. Janaine, one thing you mentioned was millimeter wave, and in terms of innovation of mobile services, I think that has always been seen as something different and innovative compared to the way we've done things before. What's the story with millimeter wave, especially in this region?
The 5G millimeter waves is already considered as part of the 5G ecosystem, of course. And if we see the figures, we can consider that this is a mature ecosystem. If we see in terms of operating launches, countries and regions with commercial millimeter wave deployment or spectrum allocation is growing. US and Japan, they are taking the lead with their extensive commercialization. Also in Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, Italy. I think in the Middle East and the MENA region, they are still at the early stage. But the UAE is the first country in the Middle East to use the millimeter waves for 5G in preparation for Expo 2020. So it's important, it's essential for regulators and also to include in their strategy to introduce millimeter wave into their networks. And the 5G millimeter wave will not compete with the mid-band. It's essential for high density areas. So it will be very beneficial for big venues, for malls, for airports. And this is an essential upgrade for path for 5G.
Thank you, Janaine. So we always talk about regions, and I've heard yesterday at the conference, we talk about the MENA region, but we're actually part of a much bigger region from the ITU's perspective, Region 1. Mohammed, let me start with you. What do you think the priority for our region should be to encourage innovation across the whole area?
I think that, Richard, we need to, as you mentioned, Region 1 is very large region, so we need to understand each other. One of the very important things that you mentioned and part of your question is what we need to enable. It's very clear from the discussion in the conferences and in the international discussion that sometimes we have different needs across this very big regions in terms of technologies. And from usage point of view, I believe a lot of the colleagues at the table believe that we can coexist or share the location of application services and technologies within the region based on different demand at this certain time. And one of the very important topic that we are considering, and I mean, is the UHF, for example, spectrum band, while we can utilize both 5G and complete the operation of the DVB-T right now in the country is operating very well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mohammed. So priorities for the region very quickly, because we have a question coming off the floor, which I'd like to get to before we finish the session. Claire, your thoughts. Where should we be prioritizing to maximize innovation?
I think all three of the things that we've mentioned so far. I think the technology interoperability is going to be increasingly important if we actually want sharing to work. And given that sharing is really our only future, if we want to enable as many uses and users into wireless services as possible, then I think that's, for me, that's the most important thing. And that partly drives the standards narrative. I think it's very important that equipment is produced that is reliable and spectrally efficient. I think the biggest challenge perhaps is that we don't always necessarily, as an industry, and certainly not as regulators, control equipment that is used in other sectors which might have a wireless element, but that's not their core business. And radio altimeters is a perfect example of that. We as spectrum managers, spectrum custodians, have no control over the production of radio altimeters. That's a whole different sector. So regulatory cooperation to ensure technology is viable, I think, is important as well. Thanks.
Janine, very, very quickly, because we have a couple of questions here. It'd be nice to get one of them in before we have.
Yeah.
So the question is, what should the region be doing? What should be focusing on? Is there any best practice maybe that you've come across that we could learn from?
Just I want to mention, because 2 weeks ago, during the WTDC in Kigali, every region, they submitted and they discussed their priority. And for the Arab region, 5 priorities were approved during the conference. And all these priorities, they are focusing on digital transformation, digital economy, digital regulation, how to encourage digital innovation. So I think for me, to have supportive policy and regulations are really very important to make this happen, to make this reality, not only in few countries in the MENA region, but in the whole region.
Thank you. Right, we've a couple of questions have come in from the floor. One is about millimeter wave, which I know we've talked about. And the other is a very simple question, which I'll put to all 3 of you as our closing comment, which is, shouldn't innovation drive policy rather than policy drive innovation? And that's from Bashir Patel. What do you think, Mohammed?
I think policymakers need to ease the way toward innovation, not to be a struggle to that. That's why we need always we all know that the technology is very fast comparing to the policy decisions, because policy decisions need always stakeholder engagement, need to make sure that the decision is right to meet the national need and demand. However, policymakers need to make everything possible and easy for innovation, and need to make the decision that is the innovative use of spectrum or of any application. Thank you so much.
Claire, last one for you. Same question. Which should be the driver, the policy or the innovation?
Well, I think the question, we don't see it as a binary situation. We actually think there's a symbiotic relationship between policy and innovation. And that's how we think we get the best results. If we listen to all of our stakeholders and we look at the technology dispassionately and assess them against one another, that's how we would go about it.
Janine, your final word for you.
I think technology in general is going faster than policy. And this is the challenge for regulators. That's why we are talking now, the regulators need to update their approach to tackle the challenges effectively. So that's why it's very important to consider all the innovation, and this will be a reason to have a new mindset or more flexibility in the regulatory frameworks.
Thank you, Janine. I can see Mohammed has his hand up at the back with a question. Mohammed, unfortunately, we have a hard deadline to finish the panel because one of the next panelists needs to leave. I do apologize for that. But first of all, let me say thank you very much to Mohammed, to Claire, to Janine, for what again has been a fascinating panel. And it's clear we could have continued debating this for quite some time. I think we even have a question over here. What I suggest, I know, Mohammed, you'll be here for a while, will you? So if people have questions and want to continue, please do so. I'm really sorry we have to cut it short there, but we've got plenty to fit in this morning. So once again, thank you very much to my panelists. And I'll hand back to Dan.
Richard, thank you very much. And to echo Richard's thanks to the panelists as well. So to Mohammed, Claire and Janan, thank you so much, all of you. And really interesting discussion. And yeah, apologies from our side, we've had to cut that a little bit short as well. But we are now moving straight on to our next session. So if I could maybe invite Richard and Mohammed to return to the audience and invite up to the stage the speakers for our next session. So Ilham, the moderator, and Philip Mohammed. Mohammed's virtual. So Philip, Abdul Hadi, and Sergio. And we're hoping Mohammed's joining us virtually. We know he did have some connectivity issues, but hopefully we managed to get those sorted. He'll be joining us as well. So the next session is going to be looking a little bit further forward to the path beyond 5G, looking at delivering the spectrum to power the next generation of wireless connectivity. So really interesting session, really interesting topics again. So without further ado, I will pass the floor to Ilham, who's going to be, as I said, moderating the session and introducing our speakers. Ilham, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning to everyone. Very happy to be here. Moderating. Sorry, it's not. Thank you, Dan. Always helpful. So, saying that I was very happy to moderate this panel with very interesting panelists. So normally I have 3, right? Thank you, Abdelhadi. Welcome to join. And one online. I hope that we will be able to join. And the previous moderator mentioned that the planet has to leave, and that's why he had to cut it short. In fact, it's me who has to leave. So let's do it. And again, going back to the previous session, it was really a great introductory to mine, actually. The 5G advanced were mentioned, 5G and beyond also mentioned, and also there's always discussions which go first, innovation, policy, technology, or spectrum. And I think this is the egg and chicken we're living, I think, all of us since we started. So I won't take much longer, but hearing again the 5G advance, it just reminded me about when the INT 2000 was just standardized in the ITU. That was a quite achievement. And then we heard about the IMT 2000 advanced, and then after more or less 20 years, let's say in bigger picture, we had the IMT 2020. And now already, and it was already also mentioned by the PR director Mario yesterday in his speech, we have the work going on for the new recommendation on INT 2030. So you can see that the first part, it took more or less 20 years and now 10 years. And of course, this is technology. Whatever we advance, it goes fast. And also messages from the previous session were saying that regulators, they always have to catch up and probably to develop tools to catch up faster. So I apologize, I took longer than I always planned because of the introduction of the previous session. So without further ado, I'm very happy to see that my panel is composed of 2 regulators, of 1 operator, and also 1, I will call it industry user. So my first panelist, and I'm very happy to present Philip Marnik, who is General Director of TRA Bahrain, and share with us on 5G and beyond. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you very much indeed. It's very nice to actually be here. Oops. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear. It's very nice to actually be here in person at an event, because it's not just taking part and presenting, it's also engaging in the conversation and understand what's going on, which I think for regulators is really important to actually understand what happens as opposed to what you think should happen. So it's nice to be here, and thanks to Dan and the team. So I'm going to show some slides beyond 5G. And for all those who may have heard me speak before, the views I'm going to give you are a discussion, not the views of the particular organization or anything else. And as you see, I'm now in Bahrain as opposed to anywhere else, so we're going to talk about it from a different perspective. But maybe I'll tell you a bit. Bahrain is a very smaller island, actually in the Arabian Gulf. But it's really advanced. We've already got 5G that covers everybody. Yesterday we saw from Saudi, they had about mobile data at about 32G a month. In Bahrain, that's 52. Our usage of fixed internet on fiber is almost half a terabyte per household. So this is a region where data is used. Whether it's 4G or 5G, it's being used today. We're also in a place where the rollout of fiber has effectively meant that mobile broadband is declined as people move away from using wireless to using fiber. But that's not changing from fiber to wireless, not away from wireless, because actually what they then use is in-house wireless as the tail point. Because almost everything we use across the internet is wireless enabled, and the technology is there. When we looked at 5G, 5G delivered phenomenal promise. It was going to be the change that changed everything. And it has, and it hasn't. It's a really interesting thing. What it's delivered is widespread use of it in the consumer market. And to be honest, most of us today probably can't tell the difference between 5G and 4G when we're out on our mobile phones. Does it go a bit faster? Sometimes. Is it a bit better latency? Sometimes. How do we know we've got it? Instead of saying LTE or 4G, it says 5G on the phone. But actually, the promise of what it delivers to consumers has not yet emerged. It will do, but it's not there. But in the enterprise and business markets, it's starting to make a big difference. It's making a difference, not necessarily in people using 5G, but actually in industry using wireless to change the way they're interacting. In fact, my engagements previously with people, when we talked about 5G in industry, is they weren't really talking about 5G technology, they were talking about wireless. And so 5G is a great word, but it really has moved into industrial usage. And I think this is a fundamental impact for the future. And I'll explain why. Traffic is definitely increasing. For all the stats we saw yesterday and everybody else, traffic is going up. But it's not uniform. We are no longer in the world where mobile meant people with mobile phones using it, where we took the traffic statistics, divided it, and said, therefore, it means spectrum. Because actually, what we're seeing is the highest traffic growth is inside, whether that's industrial users, whether it's users using it at home, whether it's users using it in cafes and other places. That's where the massive growth is. We're also seeing network diversification and densification. And this is driving a demand for lower power stuff than actually massive big macro base stations which are providing stuff everywhere. So people are optimizing the use of doing it. We are, and we've seen right across the world, more people sharing. And sharing means using different bits of spectrum for the same sort of purpose by different places in the country or different users. A variety of different methods we've seen. We've seen industrial applications. And the biggest challenge of industrial users is a very long sales cycle. You're also using stuff in things that actually take a long time and have a long life and have a high cost of change. If you do something in a motor car that's going to be used on the road in 10 to 12 years' time is being worked on and designed today. The life of a motor vehicle is 10 years. The life of a mobile phone is 1 to 2 years. So in an industry which has been driven by a change in the technology by people, by using mobile devices, will now be influenced by the change in the philosophy of industries who are using it with much larger cycles of usage. If you install this stuff in a factory, the factory will also build stuff in today into its production lines. It's not going to change it every few years that someone changes the device. If you put it in a port or the oil industry or the electricity industry, again, they work on long time scales. They want to return on their assets employed. They need to think about what's happening, not just today, but in the decades beyond. So the rate of change in the users is fundamentally different. And this means that the mobile industry is no longer the industry of the mobile device, the mobile phone, or the consumer electronics device, but the industry supporting the industrial era, which has longer timeframes and different levels of a thing. It makes us change about what we think. So if we look to the future, what does it mean? Do we actually really need to go beyond 5G? 5G is evolving. Of course, mobile will continue to evolve. Of course, new use cases will come. But will it be another 10-year swap to change out this thing? Will the mobile industry even have made a return on the investments they make today, even for the consumer market? Will the industrial users be able to change out just because somebody's decided every 10 years I should change them? And I think it's a question we need to ask. Is it now a time for not big changes, but a change where evolution happens, of which you continue to do it? We also need to think about use ways of spectrum management. You'll have heard constantly people say, I need low band, I need mid band, I need very high band. Great, fantastic. You do if you're thinking about one solution for one thing, if for the back of days and UHF and the back of mobile. And to be honest, when we did it for 5G, it seemed to be the right thing. Although the number of people who told me that because we weren't doing 28 gigahertz, we were doomed, was ridiculous, given that actually millimetric wave has been very little used. It will be, but it's very little used. So does this mean we actually need to think differently? The one big change is it's no longer mobile operators using mobile spectrum. It's lots of other industrial users. We need high power spectrum for outdoors. Of course we do. There'll continue to be growth. We all want to be able to go out and about and use things. We need more high power usage. But actually, now we need more localized spectrum as well. We need spectrum that can work at lower and medium powers that can be used by enterprises in different places and different locations and doing different things. Not the same everywhere. We also need spectrum that's for indoor usage. You'll have noticed I've not talked about license or unlicensed. What I'm talking about now is spectrum, because the licensing regime you use depends upon what the problem you're trying to fix is, not the other way around. The other question for us also then is, should we now ask ourselves the question, we are, and as you heard Claire say, Lion say, technology neutral. Most things are technology neutral, but in reality we're not. We are unbelievably technology specific. And yesterday I listened to debates that I thought I'd stopped listening to in the early 90s about two technologies fighting with each other. Who cares? Maybe what we should do now is get rid of the IMT tag, actually have spectrum which is for mobile, enable the spectrum technology to be used for the market drives it to be, and enable the license conditions to be for the license conditions to make it work. So actually, as we move to the future, we move to a future which is evolutionary and move to a future which is serving the needs of everybody. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Philip. Very, very interesting point of views. I think that already the audience and probably online questions and even myself, it raises a lot of question marks. Interesting. Thank you very much. My next speaker is online. He cannot join later. Okay, so let me then go to my next speaker, Sergio Rovelli, who is head of the spectrum management, and he will share with us also industry perspective, particularly new applications in mobile networks in Airbus.
Thanks, Ida, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this panel. And today I would like to talk about a topic which was not in focus of our discussion so far. Also, we had the possibility to have a parallel with the aeronautic industry in this panel, looking at how the aeronautic traffic is optimized. I'm convinced that the path beyond 5G will not only bring the next generation of radio technology, but also open the possibility to serve new use cases and applications and enable the convergence of connectivity technology which are traditionally not integrated. I will first highlight the increasing need for connectivity for flying platforms, and here I would like to mention a few applications and use cases which we see having an increased need for connectivity. First of all is passenger demand for connectivity. some of the sessions we had before, we heard people saying that they were very happy to have the possibility to be connected at their flight coming here. And this is something which is going to increase. And of course, we have possibilities to get the connectivity from satellite. But we are also seeing that new technology are coming also to bring this connectivity from other networks. We also see the increased need of safe and efficient aircraft operation. This is something which can be improved by connectivity. So the possibility to have data link available and performance link available are enabling the possibility to increase the safety and also the efficiency of aircraft operation. So trying to have lower CO2 footprint, which is something which is increasingly important. Okay. And last, I would like also to point and to indicate some new use cases which are coming up, and we are also participating in some of them, and they will also raise the need for new connectivity means, and these are urban air mobility with the aerotaxis, and commercial drones, which are increasingly getting important role in our society, and also enabling the possibility to perform operations which were very expensive until a few years ago. And last but not least, the high altitude platform systems, which are developing and getting mature to get introduced for industrial and commercial services, and we are looking forward to integrate them also in terrestrial networks. And we have also an agenda item during this cycle, which is looking exactly at this. For the new applications, I would like to indicate a few of them. So coming from the use cases that are presented for the commercial drones, there are different usage for the connectivity. First of all, the payload links are required. So camera and sensors are required for maintenance and also for providing the capability to bring down the data which are coming from the camera and sensor in order to enable the operation and the usage of those platforms. But also we need aeronautical V2X connectivity. So in the same way that as we are seeing for cars, we will need also for these new applications also the possibility to have connectivity between those platforms, and we consider that the IMT technology could be also one option to provide this type of interconnection. And we also see that the CMPC, the command and non-payload communication, it's required to fulfill the regulation. Remote ID is something that you may have heard, and definitely the IMT technology could be one of the technology that could be used to provide this capability. For the second application, of which you see an example with our new next generation aero taxi platform. We think that there will be the need for connectivity, and we think that the terrestrial network, the terrestrial mobile cellular network, could definitely provide the connectivity required for those applications, which are notably at lower altitude, at low speed, and could definitely take advantage of the mobile network which is already available. We will see that this is not as easy as it could look like. We see that there are some challenges and some work to be done, and there are two aspects that needs to be addressed. One side is the technology and the standard, and the other side is the regulation. On the technology and standard side, we have heard, and we will hear also in the next session, that the 3GPP standard is evolving and is going to include non-terrestrial networks components. And for this, the satellite are, of course, an important component, and we will hear probably in the next session. But direct air-to-ground connectivity, it's also another topic which is going to be discussed in the next 3GPP release. And apps is as well part of the non-terrestrial network, part of the standard. On our side, we are already investigating the possibility to have direct air-to-ground connectivity from aircraft in dedicated frequencies. And from this point of view, we see that on the regulation side, on the spectrum management side, there is a need also to clarify and discuss how we can find the right regulatory framework to fulfill and to enable this application. I would like just to make a few examples, but my goal is really to start and continue the discussion that I had in the last few days with many of you, and look how we can find the right solution to enable this application. But just to finish, I would like to mention 3 examples. The first example is an agenda item which we were proposing and supporting at the last WRC in 2019. And we were proposing this topic as part of one of the agenda items which was discussed for WRC 23. At the end, this topic was added as a future agenda item for WRC 27. So, we will discuss this during the upcoming WRC in 23 in order to get it as a final agenda item for WRC 27. And this is about aerial UEs, or let's say the removal of the limitation regarding aeronautical mobile, which is addressed in resolution 255 of WRC 19. The second point is the need for specific spectrum to be used by certain application, in particular for the air-to-ground, for which the technical conditions are very particular, and a dedicated spectrum has been already proposed in some regions for this use. And we definitely see the need, even if we heard in the previous session that this is not always the right solution, but for aircraft which are flying in different countries around the world, definitely the need for harmonization is a key point. And we see that looking for solution to identify spectrum which could be reused throughout different regions, it's a key also to enable the adoption of these technologies. And last but not least, also we see the need for dedicated spectrum for aeronautical V2X based communication. Also, because this could enable to provide services which are related to safety of flight, and definitely the dedicated spectrum could be an option. Thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to continue the discussion I had during the last days, and I'm really seeing that the innovation potential of this region is really something that will foster the development of solution for this demand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sergio, for this also very interesting presentation, and for sharing with us and bringing to us also, let's say, the needs and future vision for the aeronautical side to be included in 5G or 5G Advanced or 6G. We will go further in discussions for that. So I heard that we can now be joined by Mr. Mohammed Ayub from TR. He's a spectrum management manager in TRA Lebanon, and he will share with us spectrum approaches for new technologies and services.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I would like to thank Forum Global for the invitation, and thanks to ANF for organizing this event. Unfortunately, I can't join you in person, and I apologize for that. I am looking forward to meet in another event. I am honored to have this opportunity to present my thoughts and views on beyond 5G and 6G issues, especially spectrum-related issues. But first of all, I would like to have a few words about the situation in Lebanon, the unstable political and security troubles that we suffer from in our region, and the work taking place in neighboring countries, in addition to political instability, economic, financial crisis that Lebanon has been suffering from since 2019, and the negative consequences resulting from the explosion of the era affected all vital sectors in Lebanon, including the telecom and ICT sector, and disrupted the implementation and development plans in the country for all sectors. For the time being, the telecom and ICT sector in Lebanon today has become inactive as it should be. So today we are in the surviving mode, doing the impossible to stay alive and recover the country, in the hope that we will regain our active and effective role in the region soon. Today we are working diligently to secure the necessary requirements that allow the continuity of fixed and mobile telecom and ICT services, and preserve the existing services. Now, let us come back to our subject. First slide, please. Next slide. What's 6G? 6G is the technology that will shape the future. While 5G technology is currently under implementation globally, industry and academia started to work on 6G networks to meet the future of ICT needs in 2030. The evolution in communication changed the nature of network from a network that enabled voice communication between a human to a network that enabled communication and sense between things, devices, and the humans. So 6G will shape the future, and in order to make it smart, automated, and fully connected. Next slide, please. What are the prerequisites for evolution of 6G? A number of advanced and emerging technologies will be needed and has to be integrated to achieve a global inclusion of new services and applications, such as, so 6G should support extended coverage, extremely high data rate, near real-time latency, ultra-reliable communication, massive cell capacity. In this regard, a lot of technical issues are subject to challenging studies in the fields of integration, between communication and sensing, developing spectral efficient transmission techniques such as dynamic spectrum sharing, radio resource management, interference management, the propagation and the channel modeling in millimetric waves and in terahertz bands, advanced signal processing, edge computing, adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning in cognitive and data-driven networks, vertical industry platform, integration of terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks. So all these subjects are issues that are challenging issues subject to challenging studies and researches in academia and industry labs. Next slide, please. So, the 6G spectrum will be a mix of low, mid, and high bands as for 5G. And the spectrum that had been considered for 5G will be reconsidered for 6G. So the sub 1 gigahertz will remain to address coverage issues, to increase coverage. Mid-band will be used for coverage and capacity, and the high bands and the millimetric wave will be used to address high capacity services. So the 6G spectrum will be a combination of 1 gigahertz to sub-terahertz plus new plus additional bands to be explored beyond 92 gigahertz. Spectrum implications for 6G, we need the extensive refarming and the refarming in low band, extension to mid band, high band extension to terahertz, and to increase the occupancies over all bands. Next slide, please. So, what are the approaches for proper spectrum management? So, possible approaches for securing licensed spectrum for 6G, we need to allocate new band, develop spectrum sharing conditions, spectrum clearing, reconsider spectrum refarming, spectrum frequency harmonization. Here in the table, we see possible scenarios that has to be considered in managing a spectrum on the different bands. But the question here that what sharing model is best suited? And this is very important. Next slide, please. Enabling the development of 5G and beyond. How to address future network requirements from spectrum point of view. Policymakers and national regulators to develop a clear vision and the policy on future networks, develop national collaboration strategy and the framework between sectors, clear spectrum roadmap that include harmonization, flexible spectrum regulation, clear authorization process, sharing, coordination, and mitigation conditions has to be well defined, spectrum pricing, information on future spectrum release, engagement, authorization of spectrum for research and development and for experimental use in order to understand the new technology requirements. This is on national basis, and on regional basis, I think a new collaboration and coordination framework for MENA regions will help in integration of networks and services, better spectrum harmonization, reduce digital divide, exchange the knowledge. But here we have a question. So can MENA countries that migrate from 3G to 4G with no 5G planned catch up on the next wave of evolving technology, and at what cost? Next slide, please. Now I'll talk a little bit about the situation in Lebanon. In Lebanon, this is here in this slide you will have you will see the occupancy and the situation in Lebanon. This will summarize. In Lebanon, we have 3 networks, 1 fixed and 2 mobile networks, 10 fixed wireless access data service providers, 48 internet service providers. 5G planned over the 3 networks, and here you see that all the bands are occupied for fixed services, up to 42 gigahertz. So next slide, please. challenges and issues to resolve telecom hurdles. For sure, political instability, economic crisis, lack of interest of investment, the financial and banking, collapse of financial system. In addition to that, technical challenges and issues that we need to resolve: fragmentation in spectrum, lack of infrastructure, deployment, complex market structure, possible actions that we need to take, reassessment of regulatory framework, telecom law, occupancy of bands, establishment of national spectrum advisory committee, refarming plan of new bands, reduce authorization procedure, speed up deployment, new flexible automated licensing regime, engage and encourage academia in the development of and adoption of solution, adoption of intelligent and new spectrum management system. Next, last slide. Spectrum management challenges with 6G, we need to define what we need from the spectrum management. We need to have the ability to assign and use the spectrum in real time based on the needs, continuous sharing to manage continuous sharing coordination on the need for the needs and services, ensure adoption of sharing and mitigation, ensure protection of existing services, take appropriate actions in the event of violation and timely. And here the question that we address: can we still manage a spectrum in the future in a static or semi-dynamic way as we are doing? For sure, no. So new intelligent spectrum management is required, and the artificial intelligence and machine learning will be the basis to manage spectrum future networks. And intelligent spectrum management system is key for handling coordination and dynamic sharing process between MNOs, verticals, and NTN networks, manage frequency assignment process dynamically and in real time. And finally, here I think it's the right time to start thinking about introducing a spectrum regulatory sandbox that may ease solving spectrum sharing and licensing issues. Thank you.
Much. Thank you very much, Mohammed, first of all, for joining us despite difficult circumstances. Really appreciate it. And also for the very interesting sharing of spectrum approaches and new technology services, not only looking at the future, but also to think about protecting and ensuring the protection of the existing services and all the challenges that go around. So I really, Mohammed, hope that you will stay with us until the Q&A section. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope so.
We are all hoping. Thank you. So last but not least, we have Abdel Hadi Abu Amal, Director of Technology Standardization and Spectrum Management from Etisalat. And I think he will also share with us the future of spectrum allocations, balance requirements and terrestrial satellite to be all part of the 5G and beyond component. So Abdel Hadi, please go ahead. Of course.
Thank you very much, Ilham. Very good day to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks to Forum Global for inviting us to this lovely event. Definitely, I would like to get your help for the time management, so you can remind me. So maybe when we talk about 5G or beyond 5G, indeed, I think probably I have a story in my mind, and probably it will be helpful to understand where we are going and what we need. And I'm gonna build on some of the comments made by Philip and Sergio, but probably after the story. So one of the event, I got one of the colleague having some nice discussion about a land, and this land is a very nice land, very located in a very nice place, strategic place, very good accessibility by everyone. But this land was a bit messy. It was not like very well organized, but it was used for kids to play. And then he said, no, I cannot touch this land because, simply speaking, the kids will not be happy. And the sovereignty of the kids need to be respected. Maybe this word is being used in different, context, but I mean, I would like to use it here for a reason. So then we said, okay, what if, for example, we build something on this land and then we make it more good? No, please don't do it, because once we touch this land, I mean, the kids will not be able to play. So they have a fear to change based on some sort of expectation that whenever we touch the land, this will be something which is a bit, commercial building. We're going to get a lot of money, but our socialization will be, let us say, impacted. But I said it's not true, because simply speaking, if that messy land is well organized, and then we have a kids area to play, and we have a green area to sit in, and then we have a swimming pool, and then on top of this, we're going to have another floor having some sort of library for the kids to learn, and then on top of this, we might have some sort of more floors for renting to others, and then we have a really full solution to help even the kids to grow, to learn, to play, and to enjoy. I think this is something very similar to what we are discussing today in some of the spectrum discussion for 5G and beyond. Let me give an example of the UHF, and I'm sorry for giving this example. I'm not intentionally talking about UHF, but maybe this is just something coming to my mind now. When we talk about UHF, yes, there are some sort of existing, maybe, regime, existing condition, situation. But that existing situation, as we are aware, in many of the countries are not utilized, are not used. And indeed, we have different arguments going here and there. Oh, I need it for DVB-T. No, this is coming later. No, I need it for BMSE. Oh, that's fine, but actually, maybe we don't need the whole band, because simply speaking, none of the world or none of the countries are allocating the whole 224 gigahertz and megahertz for only BMSE, because they are secondary services and just complementing an existing, let us say, other service, which is either broadcasting or somebody else or something else maybe coming in the future. So interestingly, when we talk about some sort of spectrum today that have a certain condition and situation and implementation, we might think about it by saying, what if that sort of service is moved in a different, let us say, technology that can deliver the service in a more efficient way? And the question always was, are we going to protect the service or to protect the technology and solutions? I think our mandate, whether in governments or even in the industries, is to think about how we can get this service efficiently to the maximum number of people to get the benefit out of it. If the service today, because of the technology limitation, is not able to reach to our people, there's something wrong. And we have to recognize this. And we should not be fear of a change, because the word of sovereignty is regarding the content, is regarding the service, but it's not regarding the technology. Interestingly, let me give another simple story. It's not story, it's fact. In one of the discussion, one of the working parties in the ITU, I'm not willing to name them or name anybody here, but interestingly, we were discussing something called 5G broadcasting. And very interestingly, suddenly, some of the gentlemen in the meeting says, oh, no, we have to change this name. Oh, really? Why is that? I mean, this is the standard. This is what you are calling for. This is what you are building in a 3GPP. No, but if we're going to say this means it will be an IMT broadcasting. And if we're going to say IMT broadcasting, this means IMT identification, WRC 23 agenda item 1.5. Oh, that's a bit risky. No, let us use L system. And I was, thinking for a while, what does it mean, L system? And the answer was just, is an approach we are using sometimes to hide a fact. But indeed, this will not help. Hiding facts, trying to avoid some sort of, facing the fact, facing the reality, will never help. We have to understand that, convergence is a fact. And this is my message here, to say that the path beyond 5G, and even starting with 5G, is the convergence. Convergence of multi-technologies and multi-services over similar platforms. We have seen today in a 3GPP, interestingly, this is the contribution by everybody in this, the whole world. We see the satellite industry working on NTN. Sergio was referring to some drone and air-to-ground type of communication under the NTN, non-terrestrial networks. We have seen very efficient broadcasting solutions being developed over the 5G platform, 3GPP, IMT, and interestingly, mobile broadband. Not only this, even fixed broadband. And another fear, 9.1.c. Is it really risky that much? If we're going to talk about an IMT technology, not as a mobile, but as a fixed. Why? Because simply we are investing a lot of money. Our countries, they have a fact of digital divide in many of our countries. There is a big digital divide available. And that's a broadband divide. We need to sort it out, not only by mobile, but even by fixed. What is the technology? The answer will be why those industries are coming today to 3GPP. What is the beauty of whatever technology is? It is the standard. It is the international standard. If we can have an international standard that help our markets to grow, to converge, to bridge the digital divide, this would be a good solution. Let me come to one of the points mentioned by Sergio. It's a very interesting point when he said, we need to start an agenda item for deleting except aeronautical mobile service. Normally, when we talk about mobile allocation in ITU, always we have a sentence that toward this moment, I'm not sure why it's there, but it seems to be, it used to be there for a reason that I'm not aware of, which is allocate the spectrum to mobile except aeronautical mobile service. Very interesting. Are you aware that our current cellular network everywhere in every country, if you have a 0-degree tilting or even a little bit more tilting, that will cover also the air. There is no barrier to stop the radiation in the air. We have done a number of trials, even in UAE, for example, having a drone-based type of testing for the cellular network. It was very efficient, at least up to 200 meters, or let us say 100, 150 meters. It was very good with the current cellular network. This means, what does it mean except aeronautical mobile? The reason is we used to do it. Even if I ask anybody here, I would challenge that anybody would say why this is being repeated every time in every spectrum being allocated to mobile. Oh, we did not do the studies. I'm sorry, what sort of studies? I mean, the service is already covering the sky. So what are we going to do with this? Anyway, so let me give another maybe angle from how do we see the path beyond 5G. Spectrum is definitely one of the important factors. And when we talk about spectrum, we have to consider everything around the spectrum. One of the, let us say, concept we're trying to promote, and I believe in, that the spectrum should be driven by service. The spectrum strategy should not be driven by technology. And this means if I have a need to deliver a broadband service or a mobile service or broadcasting service or a fixed service in my country, I should think about the spectrum as a commodity that can help these services to grow, whatever is technology. The efficient solution should be adopted to provide the right solution. And I would say the efficient technology should be adopted to provide the right solution. I would build on what maybe Philip referred to when we said, when he was talking about technology neutrality. And he said, is it really technology neutral type of policy, or is it really technology specific policies? We think that some sort of licensing regime today, they are customized around technology. And we have seen that many of the market today does not allow technology neutral type of regime. For example, they can, they need a license for 5G, license for 6G, license for 4G. Maybe that's one of the reasons why some of these countries today did not even adopt the 5G yet. Because that we need some sort of licensing that can accommodate different technologies, can accommodate different type of approach to use the technology and the spectrum in a flexible way. However, we do understand the other factors affecting this, but actually, if we are looking for some sort of services being promoted in our countries, we have to build a licensing regime that can support this sort of solutions. One more example from my mind as well, that when we talk about spectrum licensing, sometimes we talk about a license of spectrum per technology, or a license of spectrum per service. One of the examples today that how technology can affect the policy, and maybe this was the question in the previous panel as well, is the technology driving or the innovation driving the policy or vice versa? I think the technology should be, or the innovation should be a driver to the policy making. We should really understand whatever we have today, whatever we're going to have in the future, and build our policy to understand this sort of digital environment and to build the appropriate policy accordingly. And that's why I would say today with the dynamic spectrum sharing concept, we have a capability to use different technologies over the same spectrum resources in a dynamic way in terms of location, in terms of time, in terms of users based on demand. And if that dynamic spectrum concept being evolving today, this means we need to look to the spectrum way of dealing with the spectrum in a different way. And maybe one very last point that I would like to highlight here. I would say the path to 5G and beyond 5G is not only about the 5G accessibility, it's about the 5G functionality, capabilities. And this is what we normally call, it's not the importance now to look to how to transform to the digital services. The important is how to enable the digital experience. And that digital experience will not be enabled by just having an accessibility to the end user. No, it's about the whole solution. How to build a cloud native type of infrastructure fully equipped with a full automated orchestration layer. How we can connect these sort of multi-type of technologies and networks together. And at Etisalat, we have been going to this transformation journey by having now E&, to say we're not anymore an only telecom service provider. We are a digital supplier, digital supporter, digital enabler, as well as a technology enabler. And this means this is the only way today to transform our societies, our economies, to be a digital economies, is to build the overall momentum, not only by 5G as an accessibility, but definitely building the 5G, building beyond 5G towards 6G, but also to build the supporting entities in terms of IoT capabilities, in terms of platforms, in terms of cloud native infrastructure that can be one day supporting, for example, a concept of open radio access network, where we have a complete split between the network hardware and the network software. And then we have more innovation in terms of the analytical, in terms of the controllers. We are building on our network to enable new use cases and solutions. Thank you very much. Sorry to be long.
Thank you very much, Abdelhadi. You were right on time. Thank you very much for that. And thank you also for the overview and for your point of view. I don't think it was, I mean, it was mentioned from an operator, but it was not really only toward the operators. So it was more or less general. So now we can start taking questions from the audience. If there are any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, while you think it all over. Oh, I see one question. Mohsin, please. Mic over here.
Good morning. Good morning for this important information that you have given to us regarding the future, what will happen in the future. I want to ask Dr. Abdelal, just to clarify one thing that you have mentioned is good. I agree, but just I want to remind you that on the broadcastings and the customs of broadcasting, there's some principles that everything from the past, like free to air, something like this. These specificities of the service is not only the service. It's not a matter of the service and the quality of the service, only that, or the capacity, but only the affordability of the service. That means the service must carry, what we call the must carry. These kind of principles maybe are not guaranteed in the mobile systems. I think this is one of the issues that there is these discussions, long discussions. It's not only a matter of technologies or only the service in itself, but some specificities, some specifications, some must to carry that we need.
Mohsen, I'm sorry to interrupt. We still have 10 minutes. And I think that the UHF, even if I'm the head of the broadcasting services, if you haven't noticed, but still I think that the UHF was mentioned already in 2 sessions yesterday. It was just given as an example. This session is really to look in the future and to understand and see what are the opportunities and what can be offered by 5G and beyond. So if you have a question, please briefly, and I will ask also Abdelhadi, please, very briefly.
It's not sorry for that. It's not a discussion, but the question, it was a big introduction. My question is, could we guarantee these principles on the new technology, on the broadband? That means, is the mobile operators are allowed to continue with these principles? That's my question. Okay, thank you.
Very, very quickly, thank you very much, Brother Mohsen. I mean, that's a very good question. And I think this is one of the fear that colleagues have in terms of transformation to new sort of flexibility by co-primary allocation. Let me just answer it by saying yes, the feasibility is there. But actually, I will a little bit elaborate if Ilham allow me in 1 minute. I would say that the beauty of having an IMT system today supporting unicast, multicast, and broadcast capabilities, and even enhanced, and even not even enhanced, it's further enhanced if EMBMS concept that providing a free-to-air type of resources. We have to differentiate between a service that we need to see it in a certain way. Who even is going to operate it does not mean in any mean. If we're going to say, for example, IMT identification or even mobile allocation, that mobile operator should do this. I mean, maybe the government will decide to use an IMT systems for broadcasting. And that's why we can see the broadcasting community today is very active in a 3GPP, for example, because they believe whomever will be the provider, this will be a very efficient tool to support their not only current setup, but even futuristic scenarios. Like, for example, supporting the broadcast free-to-air type of services that can be very free, can be without any charge, but not necessarily to 10% or 1% of our population, to more than 90% of our population. So we can get our message of broadcasting not to 1% or 0.5% or maybe a little bit lower percentage or even higher one in some other countries, but actually to 90% of our population that can deliver and receive, efficiently that service, free of charge, free to air, over whatever technology is, either a high power, high tower, even with IMT, or DVB-T, whatever else, or even low power, low tower with the IMT concept. I think the technology is very efficient enough to address this. The way to deploy it, the charging schemes, is something completely different that every country can decide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdelhadi. Again, appreciated for your brief answer. Mohamed, please, in the back. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilham, and good morning to everybody. Very insightful presentations today in this session. Question to the regulators from UAE, Bahrain, and Lebanon. And it's always great to see Philip as a visionary talking about the future of the use of spectrum. But I'd like to switch a little bit on the role of satellite, because it wasn't mentioned in this session, and I'm very curious to know what the regulators think about. For example, today, the satellite industry, with release 17 in 3GPP being frozen, includes the new radio NTN functions below 10 gigahertz for geo and non-geo, and release 18 and beyond will have enhancement for 5G new radio that includes a satellite or non-terrestrial interface. What is the vision from the regulators in the panel about the role of satellite and 5G and beyond 5G as well? If you can elaborate, if that's being considered as part of your roadmap policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. And if you allow me, Philip, I would really start with Mohamed as far as we have him with us, and then I'll turn back to you. Mohamed, if you could please also briefly give the answer. Thank you very much. Can you unmute yourself, please, Mohamed?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned in my presentation, so the role of NTN network and the integration of NTN network of NTN with the terrestrial will have a big role in the future. And this will include, for sure, including satellite industry, satellite technologies. I don't know if you hear well. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, we do perfectly.
Okay. So this will be considered one of the elements that will form the global network, because mainly in the new technology and then the evolution that we are facing in the communication, there will not be one network that will cover everything. So now we are going to a global concept of network that has to be adopted, and it will include everything. So from regulatory point of view, our role is to take the proper actions that will make these networks integrated, and to take anything that can be done to enable integration of satellite, terrestrial, UAVs, any even the wired network, because mainly we can't adopt such network with this specification without having a real infrastructure that cannot be catered except without using the fiber infrastructure. And in areas where there is no deployment, such as in Lebanon, we have a lack of deployment of infrastructure. Another technologies will be an alternative solution that we have to look about. And for sure, satellite will be one of these technologies that we may consider in the future in order to fasten the deployment of infrastructure that will enable adoption or implementation of such networks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I'll turn to Philip, and if I can, yes.
Yeah, I think I never understood why the satellite industry is so worried. Satellites, economically and technically, can provide services that terrestrial things can't. It can provide services in areas where the mobile networks can't reach, whether it's in the sky or over the sea. The technology they use will be driven by what the economics demands and what actually people want to use. So when we look to the future, it is a way of providing services at points where other things can't do it. So what's the problem?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Philip, I will take one question from online, and it is addressed to Sergio. And it is about, do you see any a need for dedicated spectrum for UAM or drones?
Okay, so I will give a brief answer. Actually, it's not so easy, but in principle, I do not see, in general, the need for dedicated spectrum for those applications. But there are some applications where you need access from many different users, which may be subscribed to different IMT operators. And in this case, this could be limiting the possibility. I'm referring, for example, to remote ID. In this case, I think that we need to look for solutions of shared spectrum where independently from which operator you are subscribed to, you can access and get the information. Otherwise, that doesn't make sense that you are using this technology. But and another option and another need is related really to this level of safety, and depending on the system's design, you may require a certain level of the reliability and availability for the system. And this is, of course, a matter of what level of resources are dedicated to a certain service. There is, from the technology point of view, the possibility to reserve resources, but for certain specific application, you may even need a dedicated spectrum. For the air-to-ground, as I mentioned before, you may really need a dedicated spectrum because you have very specific requirements and you have very high-speed systems. You have directive link, and in this case, the best solution could be really to have a dedicated spectrum. But it's not. There is no single answer.
Thank you very much. I think that the future of the studies and the orientations will show us more and more. So I'll try in 30 seconds to some takeaways. Technology is advancing and evolving no matter what. And that's hopefully good news. Let us keep our minds and hearts open. We need all technologies and our hearts to think about the digital divide and the countries, and not only countries. I mean, not thinking about only LDCs or developing countries. I'm thinking about even developing countries where they focus more on urban areas and the rural are left behind, and COVID was a good showcase. And of course, luckily for us, so we can keep our jobs. All discussions will be continued in WRC's next futures ones. Thank you very much. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you for the audience. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Dan and James and our colleagues for the perfect organization. So thank you very much. I was very happy to be among you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ilham, and thank you for expertly guiding us through that session and moderating that so well as well. So thank you very much. Yeah, another really interesting discussion. So thanks to all our panelists, and as Ilham said, thank you to all of you, both here in the room and watching online, for your thoughts and comments as well. So we're now having another short break. So we have a 20-minute break. Coffees and refreshments once again are being served upstairs. And then we're back at 11:20 with our last session of the conference, which is going to be looking at connectivity from the sky. So focusing on the evolution of non-terrestrial services. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you back here very shortly.
bless.
So welcome back, everybody. And if I could ask everyone here in the room to please take your seats again. Apologies, I know that was quite a short coffee break, but hopefully everyone had a chance to grab some refreshments anyway. So welcome back, as I said, for the seventh and final session of this year's conference. And this session, we're going to be focusing specifically on connectivity from the sky. So we're going to be looking at finding the required connectivity for the next generation of non-terrestrial services. So yeah, really interesting session once again. And we've got a mix of speakers here in person with us and also joining virtually. And introducing those, I'd now like to pass over to Mohammed, who is going to be our moderator for the session. So Mohammed, over to you and looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thanks to Forum Global Tunisian Administration for hosting this important conference. I believe this type of conferences facilitate the organization for spectrum and also highlight the importance of new issues and effective licensing mechanism for the spectrum. In today's session, we will discuss the connectivity from the sky. As everyone knows that we had before 10 years traditional GSO satellite services. However, in the recent few years, there are gradual and evolving developments for non-terrestrial networks. Talking about the geo satellite services, we have some developments in Eastern. We have also for the NGSO satellite services that we can see in the latest few years rapid launching of non-GSO constellations. Also, talking about the air-based technologies, we can see that the high altitude platforms and the low altitude platforms, the UAVs, we can see huge developments in having these services to provide the connectivity and other technologies to the world, and also to bridge the digital divide in the world. So a lot of questions about the regulatory environment from regulators, a lot of questions about even are we going to have flexible licensing regimes? Are we going to have new frequencies? Is it about spectrum sharing to enable these type of technologies in the future, and even as of now for the eSIMs and other technologies? If you allow us, we will introduce our first speaker, who is Arti Halamani. She is the Secretary General of GSOA to provide the presentation, which is about the status of NTN for 5G and 6G ecosystem. So please, Arti, we are happy to having you here, and please to provide your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I hope everybody can hear me loud and clear. I indeed would like to speak to you today about the status of satellite in 5G, 6G, and with a specific focus also on what has been happening in 3GPP. So thanks for showing my slides. Perhaps we could go to the next slide. I did want to spend just a second about talking about GSOA, because I'm not sure everybody is aware that in January we became a global association. So many of you will know us as ISOA. We are now GSOA, the Global Satellite Operators Association. It's been a journey since 2002. So this year we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. And we have 29 satellite operators who are our members today. Next slide. Just a snapshot of our membership. You can see that we have the global operators who are household names, but we also have important regional operators, including from the Americas, from Latin America, and from Asia as well. Next slide. And just to get into the topic, this is the GSOA vision of satellite in the future. So as you can see, multi-orbit offering from the industry. There's so much innovation going on in all of the orbits, but also on the ground. We are seeing increasing work on the integration of satellite to have hybrid solutions integrated with terrestrial as well. Excuse me. Different beams, different bands being used, different types of constellations. So really, when we think about the future and the requirements of the future, we believe that the satellite industry as a whole can really respond to all of the different requirements, from broadcast capabilities, wide area coverage, all the way to low latency and high capacity services. Next slide. So I did want to talk to you about the role of satellite in the standardization process and where we are with that. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the fact that release 17 from 3GPP was frozen in June, and it includes important new radio NTN functions. Specifically, these are going to be supporting direct access capabilities and IoT to start with. And this is extremely important for the industry. Many companies are planning NTN initiatives as a result of this standardization work. Some of the operators are exploring direct access with handset players, others with connected vehicles, and yet others with IoT. Release 17 has the technical requirements, specifically in the S and L band, so below 10 gigahertz, for MSS chipsets to support the development of direct-to-cell phone capabilities. And 2 new bands have been introduced. Some satellite operators are actively testing the 5G NTN protocol stack. We saw last year a demonstration by the Fraunhofer Institute working with Intelsat, which validated the standard for use with land mobile terminals over a GEO satellite. So of course there's a perception that when it comes to 5G and 6G, it will all be about NGSOs, but I have to tell you there's a lot of work being done with existing satellites and it's working well. 2 new 5G technical specifications have been introduced for NTN. One is, as I say, for the user equipment, for the devices, and the other is for the satellite access node. But overall, in release 17, there have been 20 3GPP specifications that have been upgraded to support NTN features. That is a lot of work. It's a great achievement. And what it means is that we can expect more intensive use of all of the satellite bands as they become part of 3GPP standards. Next slide, please. Of course, within 3GPP, there are so many different competing interests that nothing moves forward unless we can demonstrate that the market is asking for it. And at this point, I wanted to inform you about the cooperation that GSOA has with NGMN, the Next Generation Mobile Operators Alliance. We signed an MOU with them back in 2019, specifically because they wanted to support the evolution of the new radio NTN work within 3GPP. And they issued a non-terrestrial networks position paper, which you can find on their website and on the GSOA website as well, which talks about this. But this provided a very important market validation that mobile operators support these standards and are waiting for them to emerge and become part of the ecosystem. Next slide. I also wanted to give you at this point an example from the UK. I know it's from the UK, but for me, this is the kind of approach and the kind of thinking that other mobile operators should also embrace. So in the UK, BT was selected by the government to provide the radio access network service for the emergency services network after the UK had suffered a lot of floods around 10 years ago. In providing that service, they had to guarantee a coverage of the UK, a given percentage. And the only way for them to do that was to embrace satellite. So they have satellite embedded across around 1,000 sites in the UK. And what they found was that this was a really effective way of increasing the overall uptime of their network. And this is very important because BT is starting to deliver more and more ultra reliable and reliable services where they need to show a high availability and reliability of their network. And they also found that by increasing satellite into it, they were able to decouple failures in the terrestrial network a lot easier. As a result of their experience, even though satellite was only brought in for the purpose of coverage, but as a result of what they learned, they're now exploring investing more into satellite to support future 5G services, which, as I said, require higher reliability. The example of the UK specifically uses Ka band because obviously capacity is an important point here. So this is something that I like to flag because I really think that other mobile operators should look at what is happening in other regions and the experience with satellite and start looking into this and how it can enhance their services as well. Next slide, please. So looking to the future, release 18, the work on that is now underway. And they're also thinking about release 19. So when it comes to NTN, the 5G new radio NTN specification is first being enhanced. And specifically now we're looking at above 10 gigahertz. And the case studies that they are investigating are VSAT eSIM devices with directive antennas, including on moving platforms, and they will be using the 28 gigahertz band as the reference. That is the ITU harmonized 28 gigahertz band, of course. I don't want to read the slide to you, but you can see here that there are various parameters that are being studied within release 18 to enhance the specification, dynamic conditions around backhaul, coverage performance enhancements, terrestrial network 2 and NTN and NTN to NTN mobility enhancements, various different things. But also there is targets that we have as an industry for release 19 that we are already developing. Regenerative payloads, store and forward capabilities, user equipment without the GNSS feature. So of course you're all familiar with the fact that devices are already have the GNSS capability, the navigation capability to know where they are, positioning and so on. But it's very important that we also evolve beyond that. So that's an important enhancement that will happen alongside, of course, relay-based architecture and also broadcast over 5G NTN in the future. So all of these enhancements in release 18 and beyond are going to support, in particular, more intensive use of the Ka band in the short to medium term, but also probably looking at other bands as well. The existing bands, C band, Ku, but also Q and V bands as we go forward. If we can go to the next slide. I wanted to spend 2 seconds talking about MEF, Metropolitan Ethernet Fiber. This is something that our members are have told me to talk about, make you aware about. This is an industry forum where the terrestrial operators are actually already using these protocols. But the point here is that some satellite operators have already also started to embrace this specification, and this is making it easier for MNOs to connect to satellite because they already use the MEF protocol for their fiber links. So in this case, the relevant bands for cellular backhaul are C, Ku, Ka, and QV in the future. Next slide, please. We also, of course, have a vision for satellites in 6G. So whereas with 4G, we had interworking between satellite and terrestrial, with 5G, we now see the standards emerging, which will allow integration. But when it comes to 6G, we're actually talking about unified networks, which the innovation and the standards work that the satellite industry is involved in right now is really going to be supporting. Next slide. I'm sure you know that our contribution to spectrum use is becoming even more efficient, as well as more extensive use of existing bands thanks to technology advancement like software-defined satellites and NGSOs. We're seeing more efficient sharing of spectrum within the satellite ecosystem itself, because the number of satellites, the type of satellites that are emerging using the same spectrum is increasing. Finally, we're going to see more and more efficient use of existing spectrum because we are increasing the amount of throughput with the same amount of spectrum. So next generation's software-defined satellite systems, as well as very high throughput satellite systems. Final slide. So the message to you really is that with all of the evolutions that are happening, our sector needs sustainable spectrum access for growth in the future. The innovation, the technology advancement, the standards work really underpins this. We're talking about the LNS band because we're going to start seeing direct access capabilities emerging in the future. The C-band downlink, which is still absolutely critical, not only for humanitarian, but for a plenitude of other services in areas which really don't have terrestrial connectivity, and also as a result of migrating users because of the emergence of 5G in the lower part of the C-band. The uplink remains crucial also for to be protected from new terrestrial systems. Ku band, as you know, continues to be extensively used, especially for media, but also for eSIMs and for network applications. Ka band is absolutely the growth band right now, with new systems emerging there. QV band in the future. And we just urge also the ASMG member states to please continue to rely on ITU level harmonization and respect that, and to support the satellite sector on the international scene, because the role of your region as a voice is absolutely fundamental. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Arti, for the very interesting presentation that highlights the huge developments for NTN technologies and the 3GPP. Thank you very much. So we move to our next speaker, who is Zeina Muqaddam. She is the Vice President of Regulatory and Market Access at Inmarsat. So, hi, Zeina, please.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you also to the Forum Global. I hope you can hear me. صباح الخير ويمكن صار بعد الظهر. وبعتذر, sorry, just a few words in Arabic because I was in the conference and I had to leave. بعتذر, I had to go. بس السلام عليكم جميعا. واليوم البرزنتيشن هتكون على licensing side. Muhammad, I don't know if sorry, just let me check if the slides are on. You can hear me, yeah? Okay. All right, great. So, yeah, please. So for this first slide, I'd like to, first of all, thank you all. It gives me really great pleasure to be joining the panel today. Not only because I'm joining colleagues and friends, and it's been some time, in fact, and I was glad to see them in person earlier this week. But in fact, mostly because we are putting the spotlight on an essential and yet not so visible part of our daily communications means, which is the non-terrestrial networks. In fact, just a brief example, because I remember when I first started my satellite journey, I was working with regulators in the region, in fact, and I had such a massive job to explain to them what we do, who our customers are, but also what added value we bring to the table, and to society, in fact, at large. We were only approached when there was a disaster or when a presidential aircraft, for example, would be disconnected. So very few times when the added value is actually shown. And today it's really, really very rewarding to see the regulators talking to us about space, the future of space connectivity, and even space sustainability as well. So looking ahead. Now for today's session, I'll be focusing more on the Inmarsat approach to space connectivity, with special focus on the future of licensing, again, in a non-terrestrial world. If we can move to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So this is just a brief slide to show the evolvement over the years. Inmarsat has started off with the L band, but we've gone through a number of different bands for the sole purpose of connecting the unconnected. L band has been and continues to be, in fact, a major band for us for resilience purposes. And then we've complemented that with Ka band for broadband connectivity, but also moved on to S band with a pioneering integrated satellite and terrestrial network in Europe that relies on the S band. If we can move to the next one, please. Thank you. So obviously, over the years, there's been a huge increase in demand for connectivity. We are still building. This is just a snapshot of our fleet today, but also in the future, because we are waiting for an additional 6 new satellites that will launch in the next 3 years to complement the fleet. Some of these satellites will also cover the pole, just to contribute to connecting the unconnected, in fact. I think we're still around 50% unconnected globally, and that's really a big gap to cover. If we can move to the next one, please. Thank you. With that in mind, I really wanted to touch on orchestra, because given the change in frequency bands, given the change in the use case, in fact, late last year, we announced a pioneering new network. We've called it Orchestra, and it really resonates because it's about orchestrating. Now, customers today, they really don't ask, they really don't know, and they don't care which frequencies they use, which technology they are actually applying or relying on. They simply want connectivity. They want it everywhere, anywhere, and at all times. With this in mind, it's really not for them to choose, but rather for us to deliver. And with that, it's about getting them the best connectivity for the use case that they are after. Not all customers will want low latency. If you're in the middle of the ocean, you just need to send a safety message. For us, as orchestrators, we will be using the L-band. If you are wanting to streamline videos, then yes, you need broadband capabilities. But of course, do you need this for a video conference? Then you will need low latency. But that won't be the case everywhere. And again, it's about really choosing what you need and where you need it. If you need connectivity closer to shores, closer to airports, this is where you will need, in fact, broadband type of capability in a congested area as well. And again, we may need GX, KA type of connectivity, complemented maybe with low latency, or indeed at that point, talking about the converged world, we may also need terrestrial to work with us as well. Now, with that in mind, please, if we can move to the next slide. Great, thank you. I just wanted to present the challenges, because if we look to the future and we look at all of these plans as such, and us wanting to orchestrate, for us to deliver, in fact, we rely on the regulators, we rely on the regulations, we rely on a number of other factors, and there are a number of barriers, in fact. I've mentioned these, and I'll touch on them a little bit, but happy to take questions afterwards. I don't want to talk too much about the spectrum availability, purely because we've been discussing it here, in fact, for the last 4 days. But this does not stop, in fact. It's really, really important that when we introduce new technologies, the regulators do take into consideration the protection of existing ones. RT touched on it. We've been talking about it, and I know within the ASMG that we do this. I mean, it's one major caveat that we put for any new spectrum to be considered, that there is a condition to protect existing ones. There is space for all technologies, and forgive the pun, but certainly there is also enough spectrum for everyone. Now, if we look at fees, and this is one really important one, an inhibitor for promoting these technologies as well, the fees should be proportionate to the business case. And the reason I've also mentioned all of the different spectrum bands is purely because we cannot take how L-band is priced and then apply it to KA band. We cannot apply it to S-band. We cannot apply it to Q and V bands. It's really about what the business case is about. Why are we using that spectrum? For what purpose? For what type of customers? And with that, we can accommodate the fees. And are we talking just admin fees, or are we talking about more labor-intensive kind of fees? And with that, I take the opportunity here to thank Mohammed from CITC, but the whole team at CITC, because they have been fighting for years to get the fees down. And again, thank you. It's been amazing. Given the recent amendment of the fee schedule, it's been announced, I think, 2 weeks ago. And this is really a testament to the regulator listening to the needs of operators moving forward. Now, just briefly on the local presence and the infrastructure side of things, because again, these are barriers to entry. And in a context of a satellite operator, it does not make sense, because we cannot be present in every country we serve. Maybe in a terrestrial context, maybe in a service provider context, that makes sense, but not in a satellite context. Again, I'd urge the regulators to be flexible on that front when applying it to their markets. Now, when it comes to infrastructure requirements and type approvals, again, what is the use case? If we are talking about a terrestrial provider or even a satellite provider that is providing services in country, maybe. But if it's an infrastructure investment, then that will be huge on the satellite operator to apply across the board in all countries. The future is going to be one of a very well-oiled, well-connected world. The users will be roaming in and out of countries, crossing borders seamlessly. We cannot expect them to be stopped and for us to put barriers for them to be doing just that. I'd like to close on the space sustainability side just briefly, because it's a hot topic now, and many people are talking about it. But there are two aspects, in fact. There are opportunities and there are risks associated to space sustainability. And with that, we've commissioned at Inmarsat 2 reports, in fact, one on space sustainability, but also another on the value of space, because it strikes us that the users are not really aware of what we add in terms of value. And I've mentioned previous regulators, in fact, on this as well. So we really need to raise awareness on this topic, but also take action. And I'll be happy to share the reports as well with the team afterwards. But it's really evident that we need to control how space is being used, but also promote it at the same time and raise awareness. All right, if we can move just to the last one, I'd like to close by just taking you back perhaps to earlier days when we used to see, I don't know, the Robocops of this world, the Star Treks of this world, the Fifth Elements of this world. Minority Report is a favorite movie of mine, where we see holograms everywhere. We see flying cars. I mean, back then we thought this is a myth and it's not going to happen, but obviously these are really quickly becoming realities. And for us to really promote this new futuristic world, we really need to make sure that regulators are allowing these technologies in the best way possible by giving them fair access to spectrum, but also allowing the coexistence of these technologies in a more and better connected world. Mohammed, I'll stop here, and then maybe afterwards, I'm sure there will be questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaina, for the interesting presentation. It's good that you highlighted some of the regulatory challenges, since there are a lot of regulators here. They are hearing you, and hopefully they will like to save the satellite and terrestrial industry in the near future and try to overcome the challenges that you are facing to save the world. Thank you very much, Zaina. So allow us to move to our next speaker. He's Laith Al-Hamid, the Vice President of Government and Regulatory Engagement from OneWeb. It's good to see you, Laith. Please.
شكرا محمد. الله يعطيكم العافية جميعا. صباحكم الله بالخير والسلام عليكم. Thank you so much for having me, Muhammad, and I'm very happy to join. I would be more happier if I joined you in person in Tunis, but unfortunately I could not make it. So luckily we are living in a connected world, at least in our regions, that we can all join and we be in the same place, even if we are not physically in the same place. And looking forward to making this privilege that we are living now available for everyone around the globe. So I have just a few slides. I'm happy that I come after Arti and Zaina. They have touched upon those subjects of licensing and standards, and that leaves me with a very little content, unfortunately. But I'll just try to touch upon how the satellite has a significant role in supporting 5G expansion in the region and globally. Next slide, please. So OneWeb is a global satellite operator. We use a new technology, the low Earth orbit non-geostationary satellites, and we are planning to cover the entire globe with this first generation of OneWeb satellites. We have 588 satellites planned in the first generation, which covers the entire globe. Those are polar circular orbits, and we have 12 orbits, and each orbit has 49 satellites. And in this case, we have a continuous coverage. So it's a bit of a technology advancements required in order to maintain the stream or the seamless connectivity, though those slides are moving very fast in the space, 26,000 kilometers per hour. So you can only see the satellites for 3 minutes, and then you have to hand over to the next satellites as the satellites fly over the Earth. So this is how it looks like. The picture on the left are our satellites. We have launched so far 70% of the constellation, and we usually launch about 36 satellites in one rocket. Next slide, please. So those are our shareholders of the company, and we are very privileged to have a government as a shareholder, the UK government, and then we have also the know-how support from other shareholders, from a mobile operator like Bharati, from a satellite operator like Eutelsat, and from a technology partners like SoftBank, Hughes, and Hanover. So, as I mentioned, we've launched 70% of the constellation, and we are on track to continue launching this year and next year until we finalize the constellation and we provide the fully global coverage. Currently, there are services being provided in Alaska and in Canada as we speak. So the system has been tested, and it is now out of PowerPoint presentations. It's reality. You can connect to the network and you can be served over the hour. And that's the first generation of OneWeb, and we are also busy working on a second generation which will enhance the capacity and add on more capacity. I'm glad Zeina have touched upon about space sustainability. OneWeb cares a lot about space sustainability, space debris, because this is a scarce resource for humanity. We need to make sure that space is also available for our next generation to come. So we have an initiative called Responsible Space, and we are happy to invite everyone to visit our website and learn more about it. Next slide, please. And another one, please. So those are the orbits: the geostationary orbit, the middle Earth orbit, and then the low Earth orbit. So OneWeb sits at the low Earth orbit, around 1,000 kilometers above the Earth, and that's what brings and that's what we are bringing to the table as a new technology, which is having those satellites closer to Earth means that you can have lower latency. Next slide, please. Which will allow providing a new set of applications which were not available for other kind of orbits, like the cloud computing, and then the LTE and the 5G cellular backhaul. So currently there are some sites being backhauled on geostationary satellites. OneWeb is looking to enhance that experience by providing a lower latency, and that's also part of the services that OneWeb is going to provide, which is the cellular backhaul connectivity to mobile operators. Next slide. So that's also an overview about the current status. 13 successful launches, 428 satellites out of 588 have been launched already and currently in space. We manufacture our own satellites in our factory in Florida. We are capable of producing 1 satellite per day. And we are also busy, as we are manufacturing the satellites and launching them, we are also busy building the ground infrastructure required to provide the coverage. And those ground infrastructures are chosen in locations around the globe just to maintain the fully global coverage. And as Zeina mentioned as well, this ground infrastructure sometimes is being asked for each country, which is unfortunately could not be satisfied because of the design on the nature of the services and because of the capex required to do that investment. So the satellite operator in general invest in the network, put all the capex in it, the ground infrastructure, the space infrastructure, and make it available to the users at no cost. So they only pay the subscription fees, the monthly fees, and that's it. But all the infrastructure investment comes from the satellite operator, which helps in rolling out services faster to remote areas and maybe helping the operators in countries to expand their coverage and to enhance their services. But that's unfortunately could not be done in each country. Technically, sometimes it's not available, and commercially as well is not available. But I'm very happy, to be honest, from my experience with our friends, all of you at the regulator side. I'm very happy that now the regulators they are very open to hear the justification. They are very keen to learn how the technology works, and they are flexible to offer whatever support required in order to make the services available to the end users. Next slide, please. So regardless of the location, regardless of the kind of the application, the space provide the privilege of uniform connectivity, ubiquitous connectivity around the globe. Just because you are radiating from the sky, you can reach out to virtually any location, whether you are a ship in the sea, a plane in the sky, or a company or an oil and gas rig. It's all applications could be served by satellite operators. Next slide. And that's bring me to my last slide in this presentation is how the satellite operators fits within the 5G ecosystem, both technically and commercially. We can provide the required latency in order to support that connectivity and support vast majority 5G applications, whether it is a cell on wheel in the middle of the desert, whether it is a small or macro 5G cell in remote location. That's all could be supported technically by a satellite connectivity. And I'm very happy that we are currently, as we speak, we are engaging with countries and doing demos, and soon we will be announcing a very good news in this regard. So watch this space, as they say, and we'll hear a good news about satellite 5G connectivity soon. So I would like just to touch base on the collaboration required to make these services available. So we've spoke yesterday about the spectrum sharing and how spectrum is important in order to make sure those connectivity applications are available in the market. We also need to streamline the standards and the protocols, as Arti mentioned in her presentation as well. And we all, of course, want to work together in order to make those services compatible with the current services being provided in the market, which is, of course, sometimes is an essential connectivity, and sometimes it's a complementary connectivity or backup connectivity, regardless of the type of connectivity. That's what we all want to make sure is those services are available for the people who needs them. And that's all of me. I'm happy to answer the questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laith, for the interesting presentation and to see the progress OneWeb is doing to launch the NGSO constellations. And also we have questions, but we will ask them later on about the commercial rollout in MENA region and to know OneWeb plans to do that. So thank you very much, Laith, and allow us to move to our next speaker, who's Mohamed Jawad. He is the Director Spectrum Policy in Intelsat. So welcome, Mohamed, please.
شكرا محمد والسلام عليكم جميعا. I'm the last speaker of the last session and the last day, so I hope I can leave you with something beneficial and positive in regards to the role of satellite in connectivities from the sky. A lot of the speakers before me have eloquently touched on a lot of the issues. So connectivity from the sky, let's start off by saying that, well, first of all, coming off the challenges of 2020 and 2021 with COVID, it, let's be honest, has disrupted the in-flight connectivity market. But with air traffic being down and so on, I think this is going to pick up now. However, the long-term opportunities remain positive for the in-flight connectivity market, with air travel and airplanes continually being connected, yielding a market opportunity that's more than 2 times larger than what it was predicted back in 2019. eSIM's connectivity is expected to generate anywhere between 21.2 billion US dollars in revenues between now and 2029. So it's a huge market, it's a huge growth area for our industry, and we very much look forward to ensuring that we play an important role as Intelsat. And according to the NSR studies, the aeronautical market is reported to grow in the long term, and Wi-Fi connection next time you're on board an aircraft or when you're going back home safely, hopefully. Please do try and connect if you have in-flight connectivity on your plane to see the user experience and what it can bring to you. Of course, the next 24 months will be a challenge, no doubt, but in-flight connectivity plans are largely delayed, but they're not cancelled, with high throughput satellites such as the ones Intelsat provides, but also software-defined satellites that we are building, which is going to provide 24 gigabits per second of data by now in 2022, 28. So the acquisition of Intelsat with one of the largest service providers of in-flight connectivity, GoGo, is further proof of our confidence in this market and the growth in this area. But of course, we're not here only to talk about the one market segment, which is in-flight connectivity, because the benefits of eSIMs are huge, ranging from mining, emergency services, railway networks, such as the one that's being built by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Lion project. All these remote areas, providing connectivity is going to require a holistic approach, requiring a mixture of technologies, not just terrestrial, but also satellite and others. And when connectivity from the sky, both in geo and non-geo, no doubt will play an important role. And we're very excited to be involved in this. And the applications you can see here that satellite can bring as part of its portfolio will require regulators to be mindful to ensure a balanced ecosystem exists between the mixture of technologies. And this balance is going to be very important when you see the innovation that is happening with the satellite industry. For example, Intelsat is designing its next generation satellite. As I mentioned earlier, this is a high throughput satellite in multi-bands, not just in C-band, KU, but also in KA and Q and V band, which is another growth area of the future. Coupled with our non-geostationary MEO constellation, we believe the MEO will provide the perfect balance between the geo and non-geo. And it's a multi-layered, multi-orbital 5G network, which is part of our vision. And that's what RT touched upon earlier about the role of satellite in the standardization body in 3GPP. Our vision is that there will be an interface between a terrestrial and a non-terrestrial component that will provide connectivity. And we're seeing similar projects in, again, CICTC that we saw at the Stratosphere HAPS project. Exploring all of this is further expanding the examples that we're talking about of a holistic approach, but also inter-satellite links, where in the future, the satellites are going to communicate between a LEO to a non-LEO constellation and vice versa. And this is all part of our vision. And it enables us to do this because of the innovation that we're doing in the terminal sides, where you'll see the terminals of the future will have no mechanical parts and will have a phased array alignment, a very high accuracy alignment with the satellites. But we all know innovation and technology in many ways is ahead of the regulations. And this slide really touches upon many of the elements that my previous speakers talked about, which is we need to talk with the regulators, and we need the regulators to listen to the examples that are required for the right regulations. The regulations that I'm alluding here in these slides, for example, landing rights. Having an open skies policy greatly facilitates the growth of connectivity from the sky. Almost 20 years ago, this requirement was eliminated in Europe by the CPT-ECC decisions, and we welcome similar initiatives in the ASMG, for example, Working Group 6 that's been led by my brother Sultan, perhaps a similar initiative in that working group to develop a framework within the ASMG to allow free circulations of terminals without requiring additional licensing. Also, the network and blanket licensing. By reducing the regulatory fees, this will enable administrations to increase the usage and provide a further enhancement of connectivity to their citizens. I think Zina touched on this as well. And license exempt frequencies. By exempting frequencies from licensing, completely removes administrative and financial burdens. And finally, local gateways. Now, we know some administrations here require this for security reasons, but quite frankly, from a technical and an economic point of view, gateways are not required in every jurisdiction where services are provided. This imposes increased cost and operational costs. And lastly, spectrum fees. We would like to see fees charged for the use of the spectrum to be reasonable and only for administrative costs. All of these elements, if they couple together by regulatory sound policy, will enable further growth and enhancement in this region. And if we take these measures right now together, we can facilitate a better and more cost-effective and sustainable experience of connectivity from the sky. But I acknowledge that additional work is needed and better engagement with the regulators is vital. And that's why we are here. We're talking to many of you in this room, but we will continue this conversation, no doubt. And one of the visions I would like to see is from now until the WRC 23 is to establish within the ASMG a framework similar to what USA, Canada, Australia, and Europe have recently developed that requires an efficient and a ubiquitous deployment of connectivity from applications such as eSIMs. So with this, I conclude my final remarks and open to any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for the great presentation. It highlights the regulatory challenges and also the proposal for new framework within the SMG with regard to the NTN. So with that, we conclude the opening remarks and we start the panel discussion. Yeah, while you are preparing questions, I have a question for Arti. So as we can see that there is huge development for non-GSO and for GSO satellite services, new technologies that they are evolving right now. And there are huge need for spectrum, talking about the 28 gigahertz, the KU band. How can we ensure the best management of that spectrum? How can we make sure that these type of technology get the best access to that spectrum? How can we best maximize the efficiency while we are allowing these technologies to access that spectrum? So, yeah, if you could provide an answer for that.
Yes, you know, for me, the answer really lies in looking at the market. If you look at what satellite operators are investing in, if you look at the number of systems that are going up using 28 gigahertz. I'm sorry, there's an echo. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, Arti, please carry on. Yeah.
Okay. So when you look at what is actually happening in the market, it shows very clearly the extent of use and growth and real value perceived by the satellite industry in 28 gigahertz. And therefore, for me, the answer is clear. This is for satellite. I know we have seen certain administrations who have thought about, who have actually auctioned 28 gigahertz, for example, in the US. But at the same time, those regulators have also backtracked. They have acknowledged fully that this was a mistake. This was not the sweet spot for 5G. Similarly, when we look at Korea, the band was auctioned some years ago, yet in real terms, the amount of base stations that have been deployed is extremely limited because it's not really the right band for 5G. So I think we really need to stick to the WRC decisions where it was the 26 gigahertz band which was harmonized and not really look at 28. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arti. My next question is to Zaina, with regard to the S-band, the new developments of 5G services, the need of access for different technologies to use the S-band, also the future of L-band. So if you could provide your highlights on these two bands, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mohammed. And I hope I don't have an echo as well, because there was one with RT. Thanks, Mohammed. So on the S-band, I think at least from other operators' perspective, RT touched on plans to use the S-band for IoT purposes and also to handheld devices directly. From our side, we have been using the S-band, as I've mentioned, for an integrated satellite and terrestrial network. And it's been a huge success, but that was only in Europe because this is where, from a licensing perspective as well, it's been granted at the European level. So that made the licensing side a bit easier, maybe not cheap, but easier. And then on the L-band, of course, as you saw and I've mentioned, we continue to invest in L-band. L-band is a core band for us, for the satellite industry. It's been there for a number of years, and it's there for resilience purposes as well. I really don't want to be in the middle of the ocean and be disconnected with no access to satellites. And this is really where, again, we continue to invest. So we have launched a satellite for that was dual L-band and Ka-band, but we are also launching another one in 2023 that will be L-band and Ka-band as well. So that's the plan, Mohammed, at least from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaina. So to Laith, people are asking about the commercial rollout. When will we have the services from OneWeb to provide the great connectivity with very low latency, especially in the MENA region? So you could highlight the roadmap of OneWeb, please, Laith.
So the commercial services has already been started in Alaska and in Canada, as I mentioned. And then the way our system is designed is you will have connectivity from the North Pole towards the equator and from the South Pole towards the equator. So the more satellite we launch, the more coverage we have by time. Until we finish the full constellation, we will have a 24/7 coverage. So unfortunately, the last areas to be connected with OneWeb system will be on the equator, which will require the full constellation to be launched until we can provide the services. So I would say in the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, sometime by end of next week, we should be, by end of next year, we should be ready to provide the services commercially.
Thank you very much, Laith. It's good news to hear about. My next question is to Mohammed. You talked about the gateway and that the countries that they don't need to ask for having gateways in their countries. However, as you know, there are some security concerns. There are some requirements to be achieved from these countries. How can you ensure that the concerns are covered in these countries without having the gateway in the same country? So can you help? I mean, because the regulator, they want to facilitate, they want to have these type of networks, these technologies to be evolved in their countries. However, there are some requirements that maybe some of the countries are asking for. It's some security or some requirements that needs to be solved. So if you could highlight some of, let's say, steps or some words that maybe provide certainty for the regulators to give the chance for Intelsat and others to provide their connectivity without having gateway in the country. Thank you.
Shukran. Thank you, Mohammed, for a very politically sensitive question, but I'll do my best to answer it. Before I answer the question, I'd like to just point out that with all the presentation here about satellite role and connectivity, in no shape at all in this WRC cycle we are seeking additional spectrum. We are actually using the spectrum that we have more efficiently and adding more applications to that spectrum. Unlike with the other agenda, particularly from the mobile industry, where there is more spectrum access or more spectrum grab for other technologies. So there's a stark difference. To the question in hand, it's a very important question. The way satellite provides connectivity is to be anchored to a gateway on the ground, and that gateway acts as an access point to connect to the worldwide internet. Now, regulators want to ensure, rightly so, how can they have lawful intercept, for example, to ensure the traffic that's landed inside their territory, whether it's in the air or on the ground or in the sea, that's landing in and going out from their sovereign territories, they can have the capability to ensure that there is some oversight of that. With virtual gateways, what I mean by this is the gateway could be in an X country, in anywhere in the world, but you can actually mirror all the traffic that's landing from that particular terminal over your country that's landing in that gateway somewhere else. You can mirror all that traffic via a VPN without any interruption whatsoever, all the way back to your local enforcement agency, for example, by using mediation devices that are installed at the gateway. And they are installed before the routings happen, because once it goes beyond the routing, it's very hard to get that actual traffic. So the mediation devices are mirroring all that traffic before the routing is done in the gateway, all the way back to the lawful enforcement agency in your country. And you will have the same capability as if the gateway was inside the country. This is done before. I've actually been involved in similar projects in countries near the Middle East that have actually implemented such a virtual gateway approach. So the alternatives is you will have a gateway inside every single country, and these gateways cost millions. So it's not economically practical to do that. And I think there are solutions that you can actually provide and meet your requirements without installing gateways inside the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for the great answer. I would like to open the floor for questions of anyone. Yes, please.
Good morning. Thank you for the interesting presentation. And Mohammed, you talked about the gateway, the same thing, which must be installed on the territory of the country which will be benefit from the service. But it's a knowledge model. What are the action you are taking to change this regulation within this new technology? In addition, the fees for this service are based on the equipment and not in the frequency. So how to do?
Thank you, Olfa. I think there's two elements to the. I hope in the first element of the question I addressed it with my response to Mohammed, but I can add a little bit more to that. What are we doing to encourage regulators to actually implement such an approach? I think one argument is that we need to be engaging with the regulators to explain how this virtual soft landing gateways can be done. And there are examples that have been happening in elsewhere that I've touched upon. And I think what we're doing in the CPT process example, the ECC decisions that we're developing there do not require gateways inside every single country, because there is a framework within Europe that they have accepted together collectively to allow this terminal to operate without gateways in every single country. A similar approach can be done, and I touched on this in my presentation, within the ASMG. If a similar approach can be set up, that will be very, very good. I'm just highlighting working group 6, for example, where things can be done there, but it could be something else. In regards to the other point about, was it the cost? A typical gateway will cost anywhere between 5 to 10 million. So it's a huge amount of cost if you're going to install it in every single country. Whereas a mediation device, or rather a virtual gateway, is dramatically lower cost than having infrastructure inside the country. So, that's a stark difference, and I think it impacts the growth of the application that we try to provide if we are mandated to have a gateway inside every single country. I hope I
Thank you very much, Mohammed. And if there are other questions from the audience. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to thank all the panels for the informative presentations. My question is related to the E-band, satellite in E-band. We noticed that there is some files now from some satellite operators, API files to utilize the E-band for the earth stations in the area. So maybe only let mention the E-band for the earth stations, but my question, what do you think about coexisting with the microwave used terrestrial service for same band, and do you think there will be problems using or utilizing the E-band for satellite networks in our region, because it is, as you know, it is a critical band for the backhauling of 5G networks? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan, for the good question. So I don't know, Laith, if you'd like to take that one.
Yeah, sure. So I'm very happy to see you, Khoy Hassan. It's been a long time. So yeah, to your question, E-band, we have many satellite operators have filed already for the E-band, but those filings, as you know, need a long time until it get materialized, or you get equipment on the ground to actually use this band. So I would say we are still in very early stages to consider the E-band for the feeder link connectivity for the gateway, because the E-band is very directive, as you know, and it's almost laser, right? So it's not easy to be implemented from a technical point of view. So we have those filings, we have plans for future, but it's not anytime soon, I would say. Plus, there will be some studies required by the ITU, by the Working Party 4A, to work into the coexistence between this type of feeder link connectivity in the E-band with the other services in the same band. So I'm sorry I don't have a direct answer for this, but it still needs time. It's technology is evolving, and this will not be ready anytime soon, I would say.
just real quickly, just like Blake mentioned, I don't think there is any plans for E-band in the near future. Maybe with innovations, there will be utilization of that spectrum. I think the QNV band is the next frontier in the satellite industry. But to touch on the point about coexisting with the fixed microwave links, today satellites coexist and shares the same spectrum as FS quite normally in KU band, in KA band, and we have every confidence that will continue. The coexistence issue is more complex with mobile services. But with FS and FSS, sharing has been existing for decades.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I don't know if there are more questions from the floor. Okay, I have a question here. So I know the panelists are from the satellite industry, but we have to touch some of the air-based technologies, such as hubs and hubs. So I have to ask about the future of this technology. How do you see the evolving and the developments related to hubs in the past few months or years? So I would like to ask Artie if you'd like to provide comments. I know it's not your field, however, we need to cover this maybe point about the advanced technologies. Yes, please.
Sure. I mean, I would just say that when it comes to 3GPP and the standardization work, that is about end-to-end. So it's not specifically only satellite. It is about non-terrestrial networks, right? Which includes HAPS as well. You could, if I worked for a HAPS company, I could equally have made the presentation and say that these developments are happening and will allow integration also of that technology into the broader ecosystem. But I think Mohammed might be better placed to answer this one, actually, given that Intelsat is looking, I think, at HAPS. I don't know if other companies are on this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Artie. So Mohammed, yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, Intelsat is a member of the HAPS Alliance. We see great potential in having HAPS fixed stations on high altitudes to provide connectivity. We think the role of satellite to complement the backhauling to HAPS is something that we are quite involved in. And that's what I mentioned about the inter-satellite links agenda items. That's will be interesting when that's developed, how we can incorporate the HAPS element into this in the future. The previous sessions talked about this as well. The ubiquitous ecosystem of a network of the future will include a mixture of HAPS, mobile, terrestrial, satellite, and so on, even our land involved. So we're very much looking forward to that future, and I hope that the regulations and the license and provisions cater for this innovation in the technologies. Thank you.
Mohammed, if you allow me also to comment on this, but maybe from a very advanced and futuristic point of view, I always say, it's never one technology to bridge the digital divide. You need satellite, mobile, microwave, fiber, everything. You need all the type of connectivity to bridge the digital divide, and the last mile connectivity is the most difficult part of it. But if you look to the hubs from a really futuristic view, you might also see cooperation between the hubs companies and the satellite companies in the future, where this hub, if it is out of reach of a view of a gateway on the ground, you could backhaul that traffic through satellite as well. So you can put a satellite user terminal on top of the hub to backhaul the traffic through satellites and then participate in like the cellular backhaul on the ground. But maybe that needs a few years until we can see it happening.
Thank you very much, Laith. I have a question from the floor. Abdelhadi, please.
Thank you very much, Abdurrahman. Thank you for the panelists. Many thanks. Very nice presentations. Indeed, I would like to follow up on your question. And I see that we had many diplomatic answer, which I like definitely. And it's not an answer of yes or no question. It's not whether we have hubs or not having hubs. And even it's not a matter of similarly, for the geo and non-geo. Everybody here is playing a role in certain area. But my question, actually, that will be a little bit more direct question. And I'm happy to see the views from geo and non-geo, maybe colleagues. Maybe I have seen some more, let us say, collaboration between the geo satellites and the hubs, industry, since already the geo may lack a little bit some of the capabilities in terms of latency and so on, depending on the current physical situation, let me call it. While in geo, in the non-geo, they seem to be more competing with the hubs in certain type of major use cases. How do you see this sort of competition? Is it something that we can see it as sector-based type of competition. So geo with hubs, complementary nature that to provide certain type of let us say service in certain use cases, or it's some sort of horizontal competition, like for example maybe hubs against non-geo. And then we come to the picture saying the hubs has been promoted for certain time, especially the hubs, maybe flavor of it as a complementary to the terrestrial. And then the question is, how can we see the relationship between the terrestrial versus the hubs as a matter of terrestrial type of let us say solution, but a little bit in higher altitude, and then along all the way to the geo, I'm sorry, non-geo, and then all the way to the geo. And the reason I'm asking this question, there are very hard decisions being considered by a number of telcos today. What is the right partnership? Should I go with the non-geo, providing me capacity and some sort of latency enhancement and maybe cost effective? I'm not really sure. This is something under consideration, compared with the hubs that will need some sort of operational requirement to launch it for some time and then getting down for maintenance and so on and so forth. How do you see this equation and more into, let us say, practical implementation perspective and partnership perspective between the different stakeholders in this equation?
Thank you very much, Abdelhadi, for the interesting question. I'm asking the panelists who would like to take that question. Who's volunteering?
Hamad.
Abdelhadi. Sual.
Yeah, Zainab, please. Yeah, and then
thank you. I will start, but I don't think Abdelhadi will get an answer. Sorry, Abdelhadi. It's a very difficult question to answer with just one solution as such, because what you're proposing is multi-case scenario, and I've touched on this in my presentation. What are you after? What do your customers need, and where do they need them? Because you've touched on different potential scenarios for collaboration, and I can tell you between GSO and NGSO there's been collaboration, and this is one where if there is need to provide connectivity for customers in a particular location, and NGSO may have been the better option, but then they are not able to do it, then there would be some collaboration in the background. So you could do it that way. But again, it's about timing, it's about the audience that you're after, it's about the commercials also that you're after. So I really doubt you will find one answer to all of the potential scenarios that you can envisage, but happy for my other colleagues to maybe give their input on this.
Mm-hmm.
If I could share some thoughts as well. Oh, sorry, Leith. I think you were before me.
Go ahead. I'll go last.
Sure. I mean, I think there are different considerations here. You have to look at what is actually happening. And I know that in the region there was a HAPS demonstration earlier in the year, and it was positive with CITC, STC, NEOM, SPL, and so on. But we also have to look at the market, right? Commercialization of the different systems is relevant. We saw what happened with the experience with Loon, Project Loon. Time to market is relevant. How long are operators prepared to wait? When do they want to start integrating the networks? But then also depending on the service, as Zaina pointed out, when we speak with the humanitarian community, for example, which relies on both terrestrial and satellite, for them they want tried and trusted solutions. They're ready to wait, look at innovations and so on, but they're not ready to transition so quickly. So I think it really is the complementarity of the different solutions, and also knowing that many satellite operators are looking at orchestration between different orbits. So you have the case of Inmarsat, which has both GEO and with Orchestra they will have LEO. When you look at the shareholding of OneWeb, you also see GEO operators playing in there, which has surely got to somehow impact the way that they will work in the end. If you look at SES, you have also GEO and MEO. So there's many different combinations out there, and for sure they will all find the relevant service that they will address. Thank you.
So in my view, competition is always good. So whether it is vertical or horizontal, I would see it as an application and need-based competition, and it's largely depends on the technology availability and on the market access difficulties as well. So you have an application need in one location, and you have different type of connectivity solutions, and then you put it on the table. You do the pros and cons of each one in each country or each market, and then you choose. But we all complement each others, and the ultimate goal is get that location connected, whether it is HAPS or geo or non-geo or whatever.
Okay, thank you very much, Laith, and thank you very much for the great session.
Hamad?
Yeah, Zainab, please.
Can I jump in, because this is very relevant for Abdel Hadi? As long as the spectrum is available, we will be able to do magic. So I think that would be helpful. But yeah, the starting point is really how the spectrum is used, and again, all of the rest of it. But thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. We're running out of time. Thank you very much for the great presentations. Thank you very much for it. I know it's a tough topic. It's, the NTN is now merging a lot of topics that related to the GSO and NGSO, the regulatory environments. How we make sure that the regulations that we have are accommodating these technologies and enabling these technologies to be deployed in our country. So thank you very much. Thank you, Arti, for participation. Thanks to Zaina. Thanks, Laith, and thank you very much to Mohammed. So with that, we conclude our session, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. And yeah, again, to echo Mohammed's thanks to all of our panelists. Thank you for another really interesting session. So that's really appreciated. So that just about brings us to the end of our sessions for the conference this year. In a second, I'm going to be passing over to Tarek, who's going to be saying a few words to wrap up and to close the conference. But just before I do, just wanted to mention a couple of things and say a few important thank yous to many of the people who've contributed to the success of this event. So first of all, just to remind everybody that all of the proceedings from all of the sessions, so that's recordings of the discussions and also copies of all of the slides and the videos that have been shown during the 2 days are available for you to download. So please do feel free to go and check those out. And any sessions that you've missed, you can watch back there. The on-demand sessions that we have available, I mentioned those yesterday. So we do have 4 on-demand sessions, which are, again, still live and available for everyone to watch. So please do go and check out those. And I think an email will be sent around to all of you with details and links to those as well. So please do go and check all of those out. And as I said, just wanted to say maybe a few thank yous to finish things off. So first of all, and most importantly, I'd like to once again say a massive thank you to Ulfa and to all of our hosts here in Tunisia at ANF. And I think we really have been made to feel so welcome by you and all the team. And I think I speak on behalf of everyone here when I say thank you so much for your hospitality and for allowing us to come here and hold the event here. So thank you very much indeed. Next, I would like to say a very big thank you to Tarek, to Khalid, and all the team at ASMG. So once again, we really do appreciate the partnership that we have with you and for you allowing us to come and hold the event alongside ASMG. And I really hope it complements the discussions that happen there. But thank you so much, and again for your contribution to the success. So thank you very much indeed as well. I would also like to say a massive thank you to all of our sponsor and partner organizations. So you can see them on the screen in front of you here. So really do appreciate the support of each and every one of our sponsors and partners. And without them, the event wouldn't be possible. So thank you very much to all of the organizations that have been involved in the event. Thank you to all our speakers and panelists. So we've had 7 sessions throughout the course of the day and the course of the 2 days. Some of those split up into different mini sessions as well. So lots of discussions, had some really interesting discussions, really interesting debates. Of course, not everyone has agreed, but that's the great things about events like this. You do hear these different perspectives from different groups. So really appreciate everyone's contribution, from the speakers and panelists, both those who've joined us here in person and those who've taken the time to join us virtually as well. Very importantly, a big thank you to all of you here. I think it's fantastic to be back in person. It really is great to see everyone and be able to catch up with everyone again. I think we've had more than 150 people here, which I think it just shows that people are ready to come back to in-person events, and it's been fantastic to see you all. And thank you all for contributing to the discussions in the way that you have, and not forgetting those of you who weren't able to join us in person but have joined online. We've had more than 250 people who've also been tuning in online for the discussions, and thank you to all of you, and especially those of you who've contributed with your comments and thoughts and things as well. So that's really appreciated as well. And finally, the last thank you to me is to my team here. So to Jordan and Kate here, to James who was here yesterday, and also to Lula and Taya who've been working on the event back in the office in Cardiff. So I really appreciate everything you've done, guys. It's a huge amount of work that goes into putting these events together, and it's these guys who deserve all of the credit rather than myself. So thank you, guys. So that said, it's my honor to give the final word of the conference to Tariq to come up and give us some closing remarks. So Tariq, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dan. And on behalf of ASMG, I would like to thank Forum Global for organizing this seminar or this conference, Spectrum Management Conference. This is the 6th MENA conference alongside with the ASMG. Some people say that it's good to have similar conferences always with ASMG so that people that can attend. In the last 2 days, we had a very interesting subject discussed. First about the WRC preparation by ASMG and ITU, where we are going. It was very nice, that one. We have seen also about the rollout and evolution of 5G across the MENA countries. It was very nice also to see those interesting examples. Then we had some session on frequency, different frequency bands, 6 gigahertz, which is the hot topic right now going on between all different sectors or industries. About the C-band, the existing, about the UHF between the broadcasting and mobile industry. That is another hot topic to be in WRC. Another one, which is about the flexibility by the regulators of having and supporting the spectrum policy framework for encouraging the innovation in ICT sector, which is already seen some example by the countries here in the region. And we had also interesting session today that's saying about the 5G and beyond, where we can see right now the industry and some countries also in the worldwide, they are working on new technologies like 6G and others. And that is shown other thing. And the last but not least, which is about the satellite industry, we had here interesting discussion. And new technologies also showing in the space coming, which required to be by the regulators and policymakers in the MENA region, at least we can say it, to look at those technologies and how to get benefit. So at the end, we can say that these kind of conferences is really good for us as a regulator and policymaker to attend it and let our people to join it and to see those new technologies and how to bring it to our countries. So Dan, thank you very much really for you and your team, all who's working here or in the office behind, arranging and trying to bring those all experts here. MashaAllah, we see here a number of good industry. And I would like to thank you all for coming here, flying to Tunisia. It's good to see you in person again. We'll keep going like that to have our meeting in person, physical, try to stop those virtual and hybrid also. As I was discussing today that next month we'll have Arab meeting, or this month, end of this month, July, around, we already July, in Abu Dhabi, so for people for preparation. And I would like to have it physical, not to have hybrid even, so that people can come. Otherwise, if we keep it hybrid, nobody will come. But anyway, thank you very much. It's been really nice to see you all over here, and we wish you all safe back home. Give our regards to your family and to your friends. Again, I would like to thank the host country, Tunisia, our dear Olfa with her team for hosting this event, ASMG, and the MENA conference. And looking forward to see you safe all here. Thank you very much again. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So thank you very much, Tariq. And just to let everyone know that there is lunch being served upstairs. So we do have a final lunch for everybody. So please feel free to make your way up to the restaurant, and lunch will be served up there very shortly. Thank you, everyone. Safe trips back to you all, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.